this presentation, this whole thing is going to have some graphic content. I'm going to be giving that warning several times throughout.
You guys know this man is Off-Duty Gamer. He is my channel shit poster, but in his professional life, he is a peace officer. He has been a peace officer for 10 years. He has spent the past 6 years being a detective, working on ICAC, which is Internet Crimes Against Children. He has spent tons of that time getting information and doing investigations for child abuse, child sex crimes. Over the past year, I have gotten to know Off-Duty, and I have gotten to hear tons of stories. And as a father, because I'm gonna be a father here in the next 2 months. Me and my wife keep talking about like the navigating how we're gonna raise our kid, and who knows. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, and I could easily get around my parents because they were so ignorant, and I worry about predation on my child. So why don't you start off? What made you be a police officer in the first place? Like, is that just like a part of your
When I actually joined, I had the intention when I went through college and I got my criminal justice degree, I actually wanted to be a detective in college. I actually was ignorant enough to believe that you could just go to college, get a degree, and become a detective. I never had any intention of ever doing patrol, police work. I was never going to do any of that stuff like that. I was just going to be a detective. And I put out 60 different applications for people looking for that. And not a single one called me back because you can't do that. You have to be an officer first. So I became a police officer. I was a police officer for just a little bit over 3 years. And during that 3 years, I actually thought I wanted to be a crime scene investigator. I went to a really, really big 4-month crime scene school. Become a state certified crime scene investigator, and I hated it. I couldn't stand it. It was really lame, basically going out, taking pictures, collecting evidence, and then you turn it all over to the detectives, and you never know what happens to the case until you get a subpoena. You basically don't know if the guy got arrested. You don't know if they got away. You have no idea. And so then I started expressing an interest in becoming more of a detective or an investigator. And so I started taking a bunch of the interview classes and stuff like that. I then became a special agent for the state for over a year. And then I took a position with a sheriff's office as their full-time detective. And that's what I've been doing for, I don't know, last several years now. So
Wow. Was there a key point when you were a patrol officer that made you decide to go into internet crimes against children for a detective?
It wasn't necessarily internet crimes against children. I caught a child sex case, a really bad child sex case, in my middle of my second year in law enforcement. An adult male had sexual intercourse with his, I think at the time she was 8-year-old stepdaughter, and I was the one that basically I got to have a major part on that case. I was, if not the lead investigator, the assistant in that case, and that really it made all of the other work that I was doing seem like it was a waste of time. It made me wonder, why do I waste my time doing burglaries and financial crime, anything like that, when there's stuff like this going on? And so that made me want to do that that made me want to focus more on that that specific type of crime.
Wow, that's crazy. And you've just been doing because I'm completely ignorant to the whole process of how like the whole police department works. As a detective, are you, so you're a special agent? Is that like specifically for children, or like have you done detective work for like other kinds of cases?
I've done detective work for lots of different types of cases, because most of the positions I've been in, they require that you work major felonies. So I have to be assigned to all major felonies that fall within my frame. My main focus is child abuse, child sexual abuse, child neglect, and then I am also, which I'll explain once we start the presentation portion. But ICAC, Internet Crimes Against Children, is a nationwide task force that you have to become a member of. You have to go to training, become a member, and I became a member of ICAC, and then I started working those cases as well.
Okay, and you said you had a formal education, right? Like you actually
I have a bachelor's in criminal justice, and I have a minor in psychology. And no, I work at the state level. I am not a federal employee. I want everybody to kind of bear with me a little bit because I am used to giving this presentation to teachers and faculty. It's just usually more of an education thing that I do in person, and I do for teachers and faculty. This is honestly my first time in this type of setting doing this presentation. I also want to say that you guys are going to be far, far more tech savvy than a lot of my audience normally is. So for some of you, some of this stuff may seem very, base level or entry level tech stuff for monitoring your kids. But I feel like there's some other ones of you in here that may not know it at all. So we'll go ahead and get started.
Yeah, go for it.
Go. So like I said before, ICAC, it's a statewide task force that's basically what we do is we work internet crimes against children. That's our main focus. And there's all kinds. Again, I'm going to give the warning that this is going to have some graphic content in it. If any of you are sensitive to that, if anybody joins, again, like I said, I'll give this warning multiple times throughout. If you're sensitive to that kind of thing, just be warned. This is graphic. So when I talk about internet crimes against children and child sexual abuse, I'm talking about the sexual exploitation of anybody 17 years or younger using digital technology. I work hand in hand with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. I've used this. I've worked with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children for like the last 7-8 years of my career. You'll have to forgive me if you hear the term NCMEC, NCMEC. I'm referring to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They have a very long name, and we refer to them as NCMEC. That's the abbreviation. So I will be describing multiple times what they do, but basically you need to understand that the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children has a database of all identified child pornography that's ever been posted on the internet. And they take the images and they put them in a hash value, and that's how they maintain the database. And why that's important is because not only does it allow us to identify things that are child pornography, that they're the ones responsible for helping that content be removed from the internet, but also if an internet or a video or a picture is being shared on the internet, that by having the hash value saved through a database, let's say that I work a case of production in my jurisdiction and someone posts photos or videos or both to the internet, and then it gets shared or downloaded in another state all the way across the United States, and an officer finds these on someone's phone. They can submit these to NCMEC, and NCMEC can tell them, hey, this has already been identified as child pornography, and it's saved. We already have the hash values, and this is the original investigator. And because that way, again, just for court purposes, you have to identify that someone's 17 or younger. So by knowing those things, it helps your court case. Now, that being said, in the last 10 years, because of technology advances and stuff like that, sexual exploitation of our children has increased. And when I say increased, I'm not meaning it's doubled or tripled. It's been exponential growth. And what I mean by that is in 2008, 600,000 child pornography images were reviewed by NCMEC annually. So in 2008, they reviewed 600,000 images, okay? In 2017, 25 million images were reviewed every year. They did 480,769 images every single week. So this is a crime that is rapidly increasing because of our access to technology, how much is out there, and how much the children are exposed on the internet. It's one of the fastest. Sure.
Just real quick. So that's just any image that it gets reported. So do you have any idea of how exactly that works? How does NCMEC get there? Like, how do they determine exactly how a picture is considered CP or not?
So actually, there's a lot of different responsibilities that come with that, and it falls on a bunch of different people. So, for example, Facebook has their own categorization system for how child pornography works, and they are required by federal statute, to make a cyber tip and report it to NCMEC. Okay. So, if an account shares child pornography, if they share one single image of a child, Facebook has a categorization system, and one of the top categories is what's called immediately identifiable child porn, meaning that a lay person, someone who's not an investigator, someone who's not a detective, someone who's not a pediatrician, you look at this image and you know without a doubt this is a child. There's no question. There's no debate. You know, they're not 16, maybe 18, maybe they're 20. We're not sure. This is a kid. That's top level 1 classification. And that's and any child pornography, anything that's suspected child pornography, they have to submit it a cyber tip and send it to NCMEC. And so, like I said, when Facebook does it, for example, they have a categorization system themselves, and they categorize those and submit them to NCMEC.
And and like when it said like 600,000, right, in 2008, that was the thing. That was just for the entire year. It was two or 600,000 images for the entire internet, and now it's 25 million.
Right, 480,000 a week. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's up to the website Invictus. They are required to do federal reporting. Facebook does use bots. If you send a naked image on Facebook at all, if your clothes are off, it is reviewed by somebody because the way their bot's set up is it detects nude images. That's how it does it, and then it's reviewed by a moderator. That's how Facebook does it. Nephilim. So the way that works is like it depends. It depends on what it means. Different statutes have different rules. And so, for example, there is a crime in some states of it being child exploitation content instead of considered child pornography. And what that means is that the child can be in a lewd or lascivious pose, but they're not actually naked. And that can be considered a criminal. But basically, if they're under 18 and their clothes are off, that is immediately classified as child pornography. That's the safest way to do it. But there are some states that honor or prosecute lewd and lascivious photos. They don't have to necessarily be nude. This is one of the slides and one of the examples that I give for our teachers. You know, cars. We probably all use cars every day. I think most of us would consider a car a wonderful tool to have. But if you don't use your car correctly, you're texting and driving, drinking and driving, bad things can happen. Same thing happens with your kids' phones. Okay, if you're handing your kids these phones and they're not using them appropriately, they can make life-changing decisions just like a car can. Okay, so I'm going to be going over this topic multiple times, but something that I see in my line of work is that not only as adults but especially as teenagers, we get really desensitized to what we would consider explicit material. So I'm going to go a bit into pornography here. I'm not trying to debate anybody on what you consider healthy use or non-healthy use of pornography. Okay, that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about when it comes to pornography is specifically how much is out there, how easy it is to access, and how children whose brains aren't fully developed being able to see and access this on such a regular basis, how it affects their mental status, how it affects how they approach sexual activity, etc. So I'm not here to tell you, your porn habits. I'm talking about kids, okay? So that being said, daily pornography search engine requests is roughly 68 million every day. 1 in 4 internet searches is for porn. And then there's approximately 100,000 websites offering illegal child pornography, okay? Pornhub, I believe this is in the year of 2016, 91 billion, almost 92 billion videos viewed, 12.5 videos for every single person on the planet viewed porn. And for the past 5 years running, teen has been one of the most searched terms on Pornhub. It's in the top 5 every year. They look for teen. So that being said, if you've ever considered that means there's probably a lot of dads out there who are watching porn of women or girls that are the same age as their daughters, or mothers watching porn the same age as their daughters. Okay, and this is an example. This is where we're going to get into some graphic content. This is my first warning for everybody, okay? So sex dolls, I've seen a lot of people meme about these on the internet or make statements about these on the internet. And these robot sex dolls, and they've been invented, and you can use them as an adult. They exist. They look pretty realistic. They're out there. Adults only, please. You can buy these sex dolls. They have them for men and women. You can get them, buy them, use them, whatever. But then there's things like this that exist, okay? And for those of you that can't read this, this is a newborn, handmade, reborn baby doll. And the item description for the baby doll is male masturbator head. The head simulation of a reborn baby doll is real baby size, very cute. Silica gel, body silicone, body, blah, 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 blah. This stuff actually exists, guys, okay? This stuff is out there. It's purchasable. It's usable. It exists, okay? So, and when I talk about this stuff, okay, something that I run across in my professional life, and I think that again, you guys on the internet might be a little bit more savvy, especially because so many of us when we're talking in Discord or Twitch or Twitter or YouTube or whatever it may be, we always know that people out there are complete strangers to us. But when you're in your personal life, you take a group of teachers, you take your coworkers, you take anybody like that, you think of them as normal people. And when you think of a pedophile, you think of this creepy loser living in their mom's basement. They look, you think of somebody who looks like a pedophile. You imagine them as this different person, this monster, this piece of crap. But the thing is that pedophiles are normal people like you and me. They're just the same. And they share weird hobbies just like you and I do. So, for example, these are some girls that are noodling, okay? People would think that's psycho, but there's actually people who go out there and they stick their arm underwater and pull fish out with their hands, okay? There's also people who jump out of a perfectly good airplane, okay? And these people talk about these things. There's a perfectly good airplane. They talk about doing it together. They go as friends in an airplane that's perfectly functioning. They jump out of it, okay? And they think that's fun. And my point is that we do the same thing. We come in here and we talk to each other. We talk about video games. We talk about games that are coming out. We talk about how great Sonic was and how bad Pokemon is. We talk about these things. Pedophiles are the exact same way, guys. They're the exact same way, okay? They do the same exact thing. They find like-minded individuals who can share their hobbies with them and talk about them, okay? So, for example, these are some people who've been arrested for child sex crimes, okay? These are people. Some of them look, like a pedophile, and some of them look like very normal, regular people, okay? They look like you and I do, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and give my second content warning. This is probably the most graphic portion of the presentation, okay? So for those of you who are sensitive, this is your warning, okay? This is real evidence found in real cases on real devices, okay? And this is examples of pedophiles using the dark web to talk to each other, okay? So it's a video. We captured the screenshots of each slide of the video, okay? The instructions are how to molest your daughter. This is how you can use everyday items as a sex toy for your preteen daughter. All of these toys can be used in your girl's pussy or ass. Lubricant, buy a camera. Pictures are good, but film is better.
So real quick, I want to really emphasize these are actual images that you guys have found.
Yeah, this is real stuff we found saved on people's computers and cases. Yeah.
And like the doll that you found, that was
I didn't find the doll. That was provided to me by somebody else. I didn't find that one.
That was yeah.
Right. So, but these are real conversations, real stuff off of forums and stuff like that. Okay. These exist. Okay. So there are people out there finding these forums and having these conversations. Okay. So like a baby doll, get it inside your girl's pussy or butt, fill it up with warm water or sperm, squeeze the bottle and put it in her body. Okay. And they included pictures. We've censored them for the PowerPoint, but this stuff is out there. Okay. I'm going to go through some of this stuff because I don't want to bash you guys' brains in with it. But my point is you guys need to understand that these things actually exist and these people actually get on the internet and talk to each other about how to do these things with kids, okay? And it's not just how to do it. We have had, and I want to be careful because I don't want to dox anybody, but we at one point were doing so many undercover buys and stuff, and it was more so a friend of mine who's been doing this for like 30 years as opposed to my close to 10. At one point, he had done so many, he found information on dark web forums where they were telling each other to avoid a specific area in our state because they knew that if you were actually meeting a child there, it was a fake, it was a cop, and you were going to get arrested. So they communicate with each other about these habits. And not only that, they communicate with each other about where kids are going on the internet. What are the new hype things, Roblox, Snapchat, whatever it may be. We'll get into that more. But like I said, the whole purpose of talking about this is so that you guys know not only what the predators are capable of doing and what they're doing, but then how to look for it on your kids' phones, how to look for it on your kids' devices, and how to keep your kids safe, from this kind of thing. Anyways,
Yeah,
so the
we'll figure it
dangers
out.
of sexting, okay? I'm not talking about why and what you should allow your kids to say to each other and stuff like that, okay? The thing about sexting is that your teenagers, your horny kids, your horny teenagers, they are not vetting their dates like you would as a parent, okay? They may have met somebody on the internet that they're sexting with that isn't who they say that they are. And then they're providing them with their pictures, which I'll get into more later why that's such a problem. But it really puts your kids at risk. So the whole point is you want your kids to make good decisions, not bad ones. Okay. So, and how the fact that something you would talk to your kids about is the stuff that they're putting on the internet. It doesn't ever go away. Once you put it on the internet, it's out there. It's out there forever. It doesn't go away. Okay. So, and any site, anything, video games, Xbox, any of that stuff they're putting on the internet, that stays out there forever. And so what is our responsibility? What is our responsibility as teachers, parents, adults, people raising kids? We need to teach our kids what these boundaries are, what they need to allow and not allow and what they need to not be okay with. And the reason is if you think about it, you probably, for those of you in here, you're probably the average age that you guys developed was around, 30. But for the average person, they're fully developed around 25. Okay. So your brain is fully developed when you're around the age of 25. Like I said, if you're following Noble Tofu, it probably wasn't until you were about 30. But when you're growing up, your brain and the specific part, the rational part, the one that decides consequences, future actions, being able to make these decisions, that part of your brain isn't fully developed until you're 25. And so kids aren't thinking about the consequences of their actions 5 years from now. They're thinking about the satisfaction right in front of them right this second, okay? 46% of teens that were polled or surveyed said they would change their behavior online if they knew that their parents were watching them, okay? So, a thing that we talk about with ICAC is the kids that sit up and stay on either video games or their cell phones, all night long. They're on their phones all night long, okay? They sit up on their phones in their bedrooms or on their computers. They're not focused at school. They're staying on their phones. ICAC, as far as I know, it's universal. ICAC recommends that what you do is you buy a surge protector with all of your children's devices on it. So cell phones, tablets, whatever, plug them all into the surge protector in your bedroom. And when it's bedtime, you put all of the devices on those chargers in the bedroom, and the kids don't have access to those anymore. And why I specifically say that, I'm going to stop for a second here. Why I say that is because if you think about, I'm not that old, okay? I'm in my 30s. And when I was a teenager, we didn't have access to this stuff, okay? Our stories at school and our stories to our friends was like getting a hold of dad's porno mag for a little bit. And we knew if we got caught with the porno mag, we were dead. Like my dad would kill me, okay, if I was caught with that. Now, if you leave your kid with a phone at night and you're in bed like Tofu at 8 o'clock so you can wake up the next morning at 4 and go to the gym, that leaves your kid with unlimited access to this pornography for hours and hours at a time, and nobody's holding them responsible to stop looking at it. And I don't think any way that you put that's healthy for kids to be able to look at that stuff and see it as much as they want to. Okay.
I remember And I'm sure there's plenty of adults probably in their like mid-30s who could maybe relate to this situation. Maybe not the exact situation, but I remember growing up in the age of Napster, Kazaa, LimeWire. It was a nonstop, like, if I wanted to find it, I could, and I did. And I never got caught because I was so much more insightful about it than my parents. My parents had no clue the potential that the internet had, right?
Mhm.
Like I'm sure so many of us were able to just like look on the internet, think porn, no big deal, and like I know like people are gonna laugh when I say this, but it wasn't even like looking back. I remember being 12 years old, and I'll never forget this because I always talk about it on my stream as like a joke. But I remember being 12 years old. I remember downloading, literally, it was Linkin Park. It was a Linkin Park. I think it was Faint, and it wasn't. And when it actually downloaded to my computer, it was literally like a fucking middle-aged woman fucking a donkey. It was literally just like that's the kind of shit to where, it was just like back then, it's like as a 12-year-old, I didn't process what that is. But I mean, if like looking at myself and looking at about to be a parent, and if I knew that was like the potential, like what I want my kid to view that at the age of 12, it's like absolutely fuck no.
Right, and then think about the fact of them viewing it for hours at a time. Think about them having unlimited access to it. I mean, think of the difference. Think of the difference now. When I was a kid and LimeWire and stuff existed, I mean, back when Mika was jerking off and spraying it all over the carpet, we were limited by dial-up. We were limited by slow internet. I mean, it was 2 hours to download that song you wanted. Now you can download that same exact thing you were talking about when you were a kid on your phone, instantly. Not on the internet. You can just use your wireless data network on the phone, and it's done in like 3 minutes. Like, I mean, I remember getting a CD for City of Heroes and installing it on my mom's computer, and it took like, I don't know, 12 hours or something. I mean, that kind of stuff was insane. And now, like I said, you can do those things on your phone in just minutes. And it may sometimes not even be minutes. You know what I mean? So, yeah. And this is a good question, in my opinion, is when we talk about it, and I'm going to leave it up to every parent in here on when you should give your kid a cell phone and when you shouldn't. But are we giving our kids these digital devices with no supervision and then expecting our children to then be responsible? You hand your kid a cell phone. I mean, would you hand your same kid of that same age a firearm? I mean, would you give your 8-year-old a firearm? I think a lot of people in here would say absolutely not. They wouldn't do that, and they should be safe, and you should lock your firearm up, and you should keep it protected. And if you are going to be in a firearm with your kid, you should educate them. You should take them out to the range. You should teach them gun safety. You should teach them proper technique. But yet we hand them a phone, and we don't teach them internet safety. We don't teach them basic safety of strangers on the internet and putting out your information on the internet. We just hand them a phone and let them watch YouTube and download apps and play games. And, we don't have any education speeches or limits on how they're using their phones. And so, and I promise you that phone can change your kid's life in the same exact way that a gun can. And I'll get to more to that later, but the phone can be just as deadly or just as impactful as a firearm. But you got to think all these things. I know a buddy of mine that worked a case on a Nintendo DS because the kids who were like 11 had jailbroke the Nintendo DS and were able to access. These two girls were obsessed with vampires, and they got on a vampire role-playing website at 13, and they got found, or 11 or 12, whatever it was. They were obsessed with Twilight and vampires, and they got messages from an adult that was into that kind of stuff, and start messaging these kids on a vampire website. So YouTube, the problem with YouTube, you say, Elk asks, how bad can YouTube be for kids from a professional standpoint? The thing is what you have to understand with YouTube's algorithms and what kids watch. There was a big push out there it's been quite popular, is the fake educational videos where someone posts a video and then all of a sudden it's this toxic, nasty stuff that they're pretending to be an education for kids, but they're teaching nasty stuff and with puppets and stuff. Those things. Go ahead.
Are you familiar at all with Momo?
Is that the evil eyeball doll thing with the eyes popping
Yeah,
out?
the one to where the YouTube videos. I actually saw the videos myself because I was curious, and I remember there was a fad going around where people were editing in like Fortnite or Minecraft videos, and they would have like some kid, like this is how you build, yada yada yada, and then like 10 minutes into the video, it would cut out and it would have like the hypnotizing, the hypnotizing circles, and then Momo would come up and tell your kid to injure yourself. Go into the kitchen, grab scissors, and make draw something on your wrist with the scissors. Like,
Right.
You want to talk about safety? I mean,
Right.
like from your perspective, right? From your perspective, or as a professional, is there anything that is actually safe on the internet? Is there any place that's actually safe?
Unsupervised, I would say no. I don't think whether it matters you're using YouTube for kids, if you're using Xbox, if you're using anything, any place on the internet that you send your kid, if you're not supervising them, I would say it is not safe. Now, that's not to say that you couldn't let your kid use things like Minecraft and other video games and websites like YouTube and stuff like that, but I mean, it's just like with anything else. Anything becomes unsafe if you just allow your children to have unlimited access to it with no supervision. I mean, would you give your 4-year-old Legos with no supervision? I mean, they have the swallowing, choking parts warning on the bag. I mean,
Yeah.
anything can be a risk if you're not putting any supervision on it. And kids are a lot more tech savvy with technology than most adults are. So you give them YouTube, and they're going to find these algorithms that let them watch other videos. They may start on kid videos, but then it leads them to another video, to another video, to another video, to another video. And I'm always cautious about anything that says for kids. I'm really, really cautious about that. I'm going to get into that more a little bit later. But anytime any social media website puts out there for kids, that's a red flag for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Xbox phones, smartphones in the United States, over 45 million children 17 to 10 use the internet. Okay. I love this slide. I did this at a school recently. It was actually this year. Okay. This year, close to 60% of teenagers have received an email or message from a stranger, and half of them have communicated back. I do these speeches at schools for students, and this is one of the slides that I use for my students. And I like to ask my female students. So when I split them up from males to females, that's how I do the program. Is I do junior high males, then I do junior high females, and then I do high school males, and then high school females. I asked the high school females. I said, "How many of you in here, raise your hands, have been messaged by a stranger on the internet?" And every single female student in the high school, all of them, raised their hands. Every single one. There was not a single girl in the school that didn't raise their hand. I then said, without getting into specifics, how many of you in here have been messaged by a stranger and asked to do something sexual? All but 5 girls raised their hands in the entire high school. All but 5. This was grades 9 through 12. Every single one but 5 had been asked to do something sexual by a complete stranger. So I'm going to tell you, when the statistic says close to 60% of teens, that's because a lot of the males aren't getting the messages. It's not to say that it doesn't happen, but it happens far more frequently to the females. And I guarantee you that's where that stat is coming from. So 1 in 5 teenagers has been sexually solicited online. So 1 in 4 has encountered unwanted porn, or is what we call now a UDP, or an unsolicited dick pic. So that's pretty common now. So also, over 75% of internet crimes involving solicitation, exposure to unwanted pornography, is never reported at all. They don't report it to parents. They don't report it to teachers. They don't report it to the police. It literally goes unreported. And the way we know these stats is when the companies then report it. They turn it in.
Do you think there's a reason behind that? What do you think the reason behind that is? Do you think that
there's a lot of things. Yeah, there's a lot of things. So, the kids that are of the young age, under 10, under 8, that are exposed to this stuff on internet, they don't even know what it is that they're seeing. They don't know what it is that it's wrong. They don't even think to report it. They don't know. But then the other thing is then you have the teenagers, who are 14 and 15, maybe 14 through 16, and they're starting to be exploring sexually. Maybe they're having inappropriate conversations with boys, but then a stranger has these same sexual conversations with them, and they don't want to discuss all the stuff that they've said or done to their parents and be shamed, but they are uncomfortable because a stranger's pushing them to do more than they want, and so they feel uncomfortable telling anybody because they don't want to explain the portions of it that they participated in. So I think that there's a lot of reasons that it doesn't get reported, it doesn't get notified, etc. I think that there's a lot of reasons behind that.
And just
It's not
75% seems like such a high number. That
Yeah, I'm going to
like
go into a case in a bit that was never reported. It was actually informed to me by a cyber tip, and the parents had no idea it even happened. I had to break the news to them. They didn't even know. So yeah, and then like I said, a really good example, something I tell my high school boys when we talk about desensitization, being desensitized to content. There's so many Instagram models out there. There's so many movies you can watch with cleavage and girls' bodies exposed and everything. And one of the most popular lines I see from my young men or from predators that I go through their phones, they ask for a girl to take their clothes off, or at the very least to send them a picture, in their bra and panties. Why don't you take your clothes off and let me see you in a bra or panties or whatever. And the girl will say no. The teenager will say no. And then the guy will say, why not? It's just the same as a swimsuit. Why won't you send me a picture in your bra? It's the same as a swimsuit. I mean, the thing is it's not, because a swimsuit, most children, especially children, they're not putting on a swimsuit to be sexual. They're putting on a swimsuit so they can go to the pool, get a tan, go to the lake, have a good time. It's clothing that's designed for swimming and having fun. And your bra, your panties, all of that is like underwear. It's sexual in nature, and it makes you
yeah.
uncomfortable to share that. And it's important to explain that difference to kids, because again, they're so exposed to all this stuff on the internet that these girls see these Instagram models and stuff like that, and they think it's not necessarily as big a deal. But then when you show the photo, to their mom,
Mhm.
it is a big deal. If you look at your kid in their underwear on the internet, you're shocked, and they've been brainwashed into believing it's not really that big of a deal. It's just kind of normal. So these are some facts from search engines and stuff. Just typical Google search in a year. There's 12 million searches on how to send a nude picture. There's 3.5 million searches how to send a nude picture and not get caught by the police.
Ugh.
So these are types of things that kids are, people are looking up. They're naturally curious. They want to know these things. So, when you talk about social networking and age, this is for you to determine. But how old do you think that the kids need to be on social media and have access to this? And how are they on it if they're not old enough? And think about this. Websites like I think Tinder's a good example. You have to be 18 to join Tinder. Well,
Mhm.
how do you get on Tinder if you're not? You just
You just
lie.
yeah, you just lie.
You just lie. Kids know that.
Yeah.
They're not stupid. They just lie. So it's not hard for them to get on these sites that they're not supposed to be on. I think Facebook's minimum age is supposed to be 14, I think. But
I mean, like let's like, say the elephant in the room. Hitting I agree I am over the age of 18 is like the most low bar sack of shit agreement in like
it's not that hard to scroll your
it's
years back. Yeah.
it's pathetic. It's absolutely pathetic, I mean, I could already like, my wife, she's a teacher, and she teaches she taught 6th grade, and she's now currently teaching 4th grade. And the kids that she talks about sometimes, they're just like, yeah, Twitter, yeah, Facebook, yeah, this. And it's like the age that she's teaching is 12 years old. And I don't know. I don't know. I comprehend the idea that there's never going to be a perfect system, but the system that we have is like the lowest absolute form that just gets skated by.
Well, see, but I disagree with you. This perfect system does exist. The perfect system does exist. It's you as a parent. That's the thing is, yeah, we could put more strict guidelines on these
Sure,
social media, but the thing is the kids are going
sure,
to learn to circumvent those
that is
boundaries.
true.
The best thing you could do, the perfect system, is for you to
True,
supervise your
very
kids.
true.
So, in one of the examples that I use is if a 40-year-old man knocked on your door today and said that he wanted to be alone in your daughter's room with your 12-year-old daughter, you would say, you are out of your fucking mind. You're not going to be alone with my daughter for
Mm-mm.
2 seconds. They're
No,
a complete stranger and they want to be alone with your daughter. But yet we'll give our kids a phone and unlimited access to millions of 40-year-olds on the internet and not ever even check. We don't even look at their phone to see if they're talking to a 10-year-old or a 40-year-old or a 50-year-old. We don't even look. We just trust them with the phones and we're afraid to check. So for my next example, Messenger for kids. I love this because, like I said, you put 4 kids on the application. That is like waving the pedophile flag. Come here. Here's where the kids are. The moment you put 4 kids, that same system you're talking about is, are you under 18? Click OK. The pedophiles do the same thing that you do on Steam when you want to view a violent video game. They change their age back and they make a fake account with a fake picture and they get on there. I mean, to me, this is waving the flag for, come here because this is where the kids are. And so Facebook announced this is, I actually remember when this was announced and it was a huge red flag. I mean, I just remember this. They announced that they were doing the Messenger chat app designed for children ages 6 to 12. Who in their right mind thinks a 6-year-old needs to be on Facebook in any capacity? I don't know.
fucking
But
Zuckerberg.
yeah,
Did
but
this
they
did
did.
this actually get launched? Is this still a
Yeah,
thing?
yeah, it was a thing. And then you can do this video chat with kid appropriate features and parents control
Oh
full
my
account
God.
list and la 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 la. And then let me show you something. In 2020, Facebook made 20 million cyber tips to NCMEC. Facebook identified 20 million examples of what they classified as child exploitation and made them to NCMEC. 20 million. Like
So
when they're, go ahead.
no, I was just just if my memory is not shitting on me like it usually does, in 2007 it was 600,000 were reported to NCMEC
Yeah.
annually, and then 2017 it was 25 million annually for the
That was
entire internet.
yeah, that was
For the
images. Yeah.
and that was images, but that was for the entire internet.
Right.
And from 2017 to now 2020, you're saying that just one social media platform has gone to 20 million.
Again, this is the statistic. I copied this yesterday. I looked this up yesterday. This is from the NCMEC website themselves. Facebook provided 20,307,216 cyber tips, and an example is Discord provided 15,324 cyber tips to NCMEC. Okay, so this is directly from their website.
Is this just from the US?
Yes, because those federal guidelines only well, the thing is I would have to check on that. I'm actually not sure because I've actually had a case where they identified the pictures and they told me that the investigator was out of Russia. So it can originate. Oh, I'm sorry. I think that's where the video originated. But I'm not sure how they report that information. But I've had videos that the country of origin was Russia. I've had that happen before.
So you're unsure at the moment.
So I know that videos and images from other countries can make their way to NCMEC, but I don't believe those other countries are fall into the same requirements for reporting to NCMEC that the United States does, because these are federal laws regarding companies that operate inside the United States. So if I had to guess with my experience, is that the video, they were able to pull the data and the metadata from the video and determine its point of origin in Russia, but not that it was reported in Russia, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. It was just someone was asking, and I was actually curious too.
Yeah.
And you told me that you're later in the presentation you're going to go about the idea of, or not the idea, but the process
Metadata.
of other countries.
Yeah. Yeah. Something. Yeah, that was a question I wanted somebody to remember to ask or something like that.
Yep.
So then another example. This is a really, really, really prolific child exploitation's thing right now. Snapchat gets major money off of basically helping porn images get out there, and this also applies to kids. So this is really common. A lot of kids think Snapchat's like the thing, and there's lots of stuff like this that's going on Snapchat, basically soliciting for sex, stuff like that. I think I can skip some of these slides for our Discord users. We know that Snapchat's images aren't going away. For those of you who do maybe possibly believe that they're being deleted, Snapchat is required by federal law to save all these images for 90 days minimum. It's required by federal law. They don't delete after that 5-second timer's up. They have to keep them for 90 days. So the idea that you're sending a picture and it's gone, that's not accurate. Like I said, they are required by federal guidelines to keep these images for 90 days. And then the other thing is if you don't know about it, I go over Kick, and I go over Kick in a little bit in the presentation. So somebody said they didn't know what Kick was. I do go over Kick a little bit. It was really popular here several years ago. Nowadays, when I mention it at the high schools, all the kids don't know what I was talking about. But about 6-7 years ago, it was really popular. It was really popular, and I think it's more popular in other places than it is in my location. But it'd been changed. They don't use it as much now. But if your kids have Snapchat, if you decide to let your kids use Snapchat for whatever reason, if you don't know what My Eyes Only is, I've memorized this. You take your phone, okay, you go to the camera app, which you see on the screen, swipe up on the phone, and then swipe right 3 times. That'll take you to My Eyes Only, and that's what will pop up on the screen is My Eyes Only. So if you do that on your kid's phone and you see a 4-digit PIN code, you take your kid's phone away until they give you that code. Because I promise you, if they have that set up, and when you scroll to that screen, if it doesn't say, set up My Eyes Only, here's how you set it up, then if it shows a number pad, you take their phone away until they give you that code. Because I've never once in my career seized a phone that had My Eyes Only, open it up that there wasn't porn in that folder. I've never once in my career ever opened a phone that didn't have that. Every time, that's where they put their images because it's an encrypted file. Is you can take any images from Snapchat, or you can take any images or videos from your phone. You can then put them into My Eyes Only, and they become an encrypted file. Meaning that if you don't enter the correct password, if you reset the password, whatever, it wipes the file. And it's supposed to be a more secure way to protect and store your photos so that other people can't see them. It is properly encrypted. If you don't enter the 4-digit passcode, it's got really heavy encryption. It's very difficult to break the file outside of the application. We've tried it. It has industry standard encryption. Is it W2P or whatever it is? I don't remember. It's industry standard. And so if they don't remember the password, if you reset the password, it deletes all the photos. And you can, again, Tofu could send me a picture right now of this Discord call, and I could add that picture to Snapchat My Eyes Only. It does not have to be from Snapchat. You can add any photo or video on your phone to My Eyes Only, okay? And again, I have searched hundreds of thousands of phones, and pedophiles included, and I go through there and I find their naked pictures every time. That's where they're keeping them, is in that My Eyes Only. So if your kids have that, you need to be checking it. So that's a really good question, Dr. Cox. If your kid has porn on their phone and I see it and I don't report it, could I be enabling child pornography? So if your child has porn of themselves on their phone, that is a federal crime. Okay? The moment that picture leaves that phone, that is distributing child pornography, which is also a federal crime. Okay? And then if they created it themselves, if they were the ones that took the picture, that's production of child pornography, which is also a federal crime. So if you find that stuff on your kid's phone, again, I go over this at the end of the presentation, but I'll cover it now because I don't mind. If you find that stuff on your kid's phone, you need to take their phone, you need to lock the phone and put it in airplane mode, preserve the images, and call law enforcement. And I go over that towards the end of what you should do if you find that stuff on your kid's phone. But it is criminal to have those on on their devices. And I've gone into multiple houses and seized all of the devices because I got a cyber tip that this stuff was being produced. Follow up, if you own that phone, are you already screwed from a federal standpoint? I suppose this is an officer versus lawyer talk. It kind of depends on the circumstances. I try to give people charity when it comes to these certain things, and a lot of prosecutors are going to be a little bit more lenient depending on the context of what happened. But the thing you have to understand is that if your kids have these images on their phone, the last thing you need to be worried about is prison time. And then first thing you need to be worried about is who did your kids send these to, and is it going to affect them for the rest of their lives? Did they send this to a stranger? Did they send this to kids at school? Even if they send it to kids at school, you could be looking at very, very, very severe forms of cyberbullying if anything goes wrong. So the last thing, if I found that stuff on my kid's phone, the last thing I'm worried about is going to prison, and the first thing I'm worried about is the safety of my kid. Again, like I said, I already explained that Snapchats don't disappear from Snapchat. This is an example of softball team that lost it. So Snapchat in 2020, this is pulled from the same stats yesterday. In 2020, they made 144,000 cyber tips to NCMEC in 2020.
That's just so much. That's just so much.
Yep. So, and if you look at the bottom there, you'll see Twitter made 65,000 reports to NCMEC as well. So, like I said, there's a lot of social media stuff out there. I believe I go over TikTok, but yeah. So, like for example, one of the ones, this was a few years ago. It's not near as popular now, but a lot of people didn't know that stupid game on your phone, Trivia Crack, that was so popular a couple years back. It had a direct message function. We got cyber tips on that for several years because of freaking Trivia Crack. So
I would say I recognize that, and I remember me and my wife used to play that back and forth when we first started dating.
Yeah, and you can DM each other on there and everything too. And lots of pedophiles were flocking to it because they knew tons of kids were playing Trivia Crack. So this is I love these slides. These are I think they're really funny. If you're gonna allow your kids to have Snapchat, if you're gonna allow your kids to have Snapchat, then you should add your kids on there, and you should make a Snapchat account and add your kids, and so you can get stuff like this. Okay, you can get the pictures from your kid like this. Ready to begin class and learn, Bible study and singing to Jesus.
Yeah, of course.
Time for bed. Okay. So create an account and follow your kids so you can get these dumb fake pictures that they're doing to pretend to be good, because they're also going to do this. They're if you're not paying attention to them, they're going to create two accounts. They're going to have one that my mom is friends with me on, and they're going to have their safe Facebook, their safe MySpace, their safe Twitter account, and then they're going to have their other one where they change their name to not their name. They change it to something else, and they tell all their friends at school so that they can Snapchat each other and then advertise their kick and other things like that. So that they can send the pictures. Same with Xbox. Xbox has a messaging feature. There's messaging stuff on Xbox. Any video game device, Switch, Xbox.
I was about to say, from the sound of it, it's like if you can message someone and it's a popular form. It doesn't even have to be popular, honestly, right? It could just be any kind of form of messaging that your phone has direct contact with.
Again, if your kids are hanging out there, the predators are going there too. It doesn't matter if it's Xbox. It doesn't matter what it is. If the kids are hanging out there, the pedos are too. And for all of you guys out there that hate the way that Nintendo does friend codes and stuff, I think if you have a 10 or 12-year-old kid, that friend code thing is going to sound a lot more cool than when you're trying to add 50 new people on Mario Kart, because you're going to be really grateful that Nintendo goes to such lengths to make sure that you have to actually know the person you're talking to before you can add them as a friend. It's a very different perspective when you're thinking of it from the point of view of a 10-year-old versus a Twitch streamer trying to add 50 people to play Mario Kart. So it's one of those things that it's a pain in the butt, and then you realize, well, maybe it's a pain in the butt. That's worth dealing with to protect my kids. So here's an example. Florida teacher sends nudes to 15-year-old boy she met on Xbox One. So she admits to sending pictures to these kids on Xbox One, where they then moved to Kick, and they would use video chat and conversations on Kick and video chats. And then they told detectives the teenager was the only person who understood her, and that it slowly progressed from extremely vulgar and sexually explicit language. So yeah. So Kick, this is another example. Again, it's not as popular as it used to be in my area. I want to specify in my area. So there's lots of these sites. Kids cycle through things. Things go in and out of fashion. We had some severe problems with Kick a while back, and now some of the kids, when I talk to them, they don't even know what Kick is. But it is a lot of things where basically, but because a lot of parents don't know what it is, they don't use it. That means it's popular for the kids. So they get on Snapchat and then they say, hey, you should add me on Kick, because their parents don't know what Kick is. And then they use these messages. Instagram, for those of you that don't know, is now owned by Facebook. They basically operate the same. That it's owned by Meta now, and all their stats are shared. So when it talks about Facebook reporting NCMEC stuff, that includes Instagram, because they're owned by the same company. They share stats. So this one is personal to me. This is one of my cases that I worked recently. I had some really good parents, proactive, old school, responsible parents. Their daughter was like 8 or 9 years old. They did not let their children have phones, but they did let their children use their phones to play games and do things. So their kids were using. It wasn't called Musically, which is the one I have up right now. It was not called Musically, but it was actually. You know what? Let me look it up real quick. Basically, this was a singing app, a karaoke singing app that was sponsored by American Idol. It was sponsored by American Idol. You could get on this app. You could actually sing into the phone and do a tryout for American Idol. But that being said, what the main purpose of the app was is me and Tofu would get on there, and you join up, and it randomly pairs you with another user to sing songs. We've probably all seen those YouTube videos of you getting lucky and you sing with the person who actually sang the song. Maybe you got paired with Jack Black, whatever. So this was actually one of my cases. The kid never told the parents that this happened. Basically, what happened is I had a kid that was using their parents' phone on this music app, and you could get on there and record yourself singing, and it would pair you with another user. Okay, so it would look something like this. Okay, so you would sing with random people, and it would play the lyrics to the songs. Da 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 da. So these are real. This is from a real case that I got, and the kid never told the parents. The parents didn't know. The kid didn't have their own phone. They were using their parents' phone, and the company made a cyber tip because this little girl was singing and playing stupid songs. And if you'll look on the right here, this guy is grabbing his crotch with a clear boner and asking this girl to change her clothes, point the camera down, put on a crop top. Will you check your DMs afterwards? Blah, 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 blah. And the parents didn't even know this was going on their phones. They had no idea. The girl never told them. They thought she was just singing, songs on an app. So, the reason that I share this particular case, and the parents actually gave me the permission to use it for lessons for people so that they know, because they're, like I said, they're good parents. The dad found out, and he wanted to buy a plane ticket to Peru to kill the guy. He was very, very upset about it. And, these are good, diligent parents, but they didn't know that this kind of thing was going on. They had no idea. You got to be checking your kid's phone, even when you think it's something innocent or something silly like Trivia Crack. And then this one was a popular app for a long time, Sahara. You could get on there. In fact, some people use this for a while to post information about when cops were doing speed traps. They would post on there that there was a speed trap here, etc. So question by Fuzzy: how much of this turns out to be international and beyond the reach of typical American law? That very, very, very much depends on the country of origin where the message comes from, because some countries honor American legal service. So if I type a search warrant to said country and they're in said country, they will recognize American legal service. And then there are other countries who do not. They do not accept American legal service. And I think that this is a good time, since we have a few minutes left on the Zoom before we have to reset it. This is a really good time to talk about one of my interactions. For example, I dealt with a company out of New Zealand called Mega. If you guys don't know what Mega is the New Zealand equivalent of Dropbox It is a website you can use to share files and upload files and download files. They have personally, Mega has just decided this. It's not a law or anything like that. Mega has determined that they have a zero tolerance policy for child exploitation. Zero tolerance. And it is an absolute delight to work with Mega because I've had 2 cases where I had to go through New Zealand to do that. And they do not require any legal service. They require no search warrants. They require no legal documents. You provide them with your identification, how you're a peace officer, and where you're out of, and you have to provide proof. And then you send a request for the files that have been identified as child exploitation. They look at them themselves and identify them. They take them down. They ban the user, and they provide you with all the information that you request with no legal documents. So I literally send them a letter saying that this is what I want, and they send it all back. They have a no tolerance policy for it whatsoever. They do not allow it on the platform.
Are there any other countries that have that same thing, or has it only been New Zealand, or is New Zealand the only one that you've ever been personally encountered?
Well, to be specific, it's not a country, it's a company. Mega themselves has decided this. I don't believe New Zealand forces them to do this. I don't think it's a New Zealand thing. It's simply the company Mega has decided that they do not support any type of child exploitation. They just have a zero tolerance policy for it. And no, I have not experienced any other company that is as aggressive against it as Mega. I've never worked with a company that would just say, here's all the information, here's the files, here's the IP address, here's the user information. Also, we've banned this user, and we've also turned off all sharing of this file until your investigation is complete. Or, they'll say, we've identified this ourselves as child exploitation. You cannot share this anymore. We've removed it from our platform, but we'll preserve all the files for your criminal investigation. So they save them on their servers, but they don't make them accessible to be downloaded anymore. So
are there other companies out there like Mega that are in that same structure where they are meant to essentially be the middleman between, say, the United States and another country? Or is Mega the only one that you know of?
No, that's not the only one that I know of. It's the only one I know of that has such an aggressive policy. So again, I've worked other cases. One that's really, really prominent right now for criminal activity all across the board is called Telegram. And Telegram is a Snapchat-like application that you can join groups and stuff on. You can share information, and it deletes it after it's posted. But it's based, if I remember correctly, it's based out of Russia. And they honor very little United States legal service. And my understanding is most investigators, what they're doing to work cases on Telegram is they are creating their own accounts to monitor the activity because Telegram doesn't honor very much of the legal service, is my understanding. But I've only had one interaction with Telegram, and I didn't have to send them legal service because all this stuff was saved in the unallocated space on the device. So we were able to pull it all off the device. We didn't have to go through Telegram. I do know that Telegram does have standard chatting and texting, but it also has the feature where you can send images, and then after a certain time period, they are deleted. It has a function that's similar to Snapchat. So Invictus had said that Telegram is a standard chatting app. It has group chats, it has group text messages, but it also has a feature where you can share files, and then after a certain period of time, it deletes the files. This is a topic that I really enjoy talking about with my adults. It's a lot harder to get through to my teenagers because teenagers want to believe that nothing is addictive, that they can overcome anything and stuff like that. And I think when we reach adulthood and we get to the ages that we are now, especially in this Discord, we can very much understand addictive behavior. I think a lot of us in here have had trouble walking away from the internet sometimes and putting it down. And as Tofu loves to say, touch grass. It can be difficult.
Or in my case, go touch dirt because I don't have fucking grass.
Get some sunshine. Get your bald head a tan. Yeah. So some of us have a lot of. Some of us really have trouble putting it down. We have a lot of trouble putting it away and stepping away from the internet. But with our children, it's so difficult because of the pressure to join social media and be on social media and text messaging applications and social media applications. When you get those text messages from that girl that you think is cute, or that guy you think is cute, or for Dora Gurun's life, the first time he gets a text from a girl, period, ever, you get a dopamine rush. You get a dopamine rush to your head. It floods you with a positive reinforcement. And then the problem is, though, is that we start looking at these social medias. We're on our devices all the time. You just taking away, not even including, the fact that how many of our kids are making completely internet-based relationships. They're not developing, in-person relationships. It's all over the internet. So taking the parasocial stuff away, taking that away, you then think about the comparison between other social medias. You put the two of us on social media, and I look like such a Chad, and you look like such a bald loser, but you're the one that has a kid on the way. But if you take that out of context, I get a lot of interactions on social media. People follow my pictures, they comment, they heart it, whatever. And then you, on the other hand, being bald and not that
Buff.
handsome, you don't get as much interaction.
We can't all look like you, man. All right, we can't all look like you.
So you start doing that, and you don't get those interactions. Kids, the problem with social media is that it encourages our kids to compare themselves to other people instead of themselves. They look at these other people and the interactions that they get, and even worse, when you take it to a personal level, the kids that are at their school, they like this girl, but the girl is enamored with this guy that looks like somebody else, and they give all of them attention, and then they wonder why I'm not getting any attention. And I'm not even discussing at this point, cyberbullying or anything like that. I'm literally just talking about, the kids who get a ton of notifications, and even it can be small things. Maybe, Tofu, you have a really attractive son, and you guys go to the gym together and eat right. And when he's 10, 11, 12, as he starts to hit puberty, he's really fit, he eats right, all that stuff. But you make the decision as parents when he's 14 to put braces on him. And it's for the benefit of his health. But he goes from getting tons of attention from the girls at his school through puberty to being this nerd with braces and being made fun of. And then it's all over social media, all of his interactions, all of his phones, all of his pictures, everything. He goes from getting tons and tons of likes from girls all over the place to a lot less interaction. And it causes them to have these social issues. And I include learning problems on here because they get so addicted to their devices, they can't go to schools and put their phones down. They're so addicted to the dopamine that comes with these phones. They can't put it away. They stay awake till 2 a.m. on their phones, and then they can't focus the next day in school.
I realize, like, as a Twitch streamer, like, this is like, it's funny because fear of missing out, that is literally like, I don't want to say like it's a tactic, but it is obviously like a thing that I think streamers, even me, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm not guilty of it. We try and develop a concept of fear of missing out, so that way, the content that we make, you don't want people to miss it. You want people to want to watch you. Right. And, the whole self-validation thing, it is like so important in my opinion, the whole self-validation, and how social media has really, really perpetuated the idea of valuing everyone else's opinion before your own. It is such a problem.
And look at these influencers as an example. I mean, I've seen the behind the scenes. I've seen the influencers who are fit and they go to the gym, but instead of posting a picture inside of their house or in front of their house, they rent a tour house for $50 for the day so that they can go take pictures in front of this mansion to make it look like they're these influencers leading wealthy lives. And they're not. It's all fake. You don't know what's real behind the social media. You don't know, but the kids don't know that. Children don't know that. It's just the same as pornography. Your 13-year-old kid doesn't know that that's not a real sexual interaction. They think that's how sex works. I
think that circles back to your first point on how, when I was saying that there's no perfect system, to not allow a child or allow anyone on the internet, like the whole honor system of, I agree I'm over the age of 18, like you said, there was no perfect system. I think it goes exactly back to that, to where I think it's so important that as a parent, that is what, that is like a foundation that you teach your child, your
Right.
kid, that your perspective and your validation should always come from within, because the second that the praise, the second that the praise stops coming from the outside is the second that your happiness will leave with it. And then you're going to start relying on being desperate and trying to do things to get, said attention. You see it all the time. You see it everywhere. You see it on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram.
There's a lot of adults that struggle with that, but I think on the same token, there's a lot of adults that have a really hard time taking their brain and taking it back in time 20 years. They don't think this is such a big deal for their kid because they've developed, they're married, they're happy, they're financially successful, and so they don't have any problems with Facebook. They look at their neighbor and they're not jealous, but they don't realize, they don't take themselves back. How would this affect me if I were 20 years younger? They don't consider those things. They think this game is okay for me. This social media is okay for me. I don't see why it's a problem for my kid.
But I think that on that same note, that people can't rewind 20 years, I think that there's a lot of people that do. And I would even argue that there are people who can turn back, like say, me, for example, I'm 32 years old, about to turn 33. I can turn back my brain 20 years and remember exactly where I was when I was 12. And I could think of like all the dumb shit that I was exposed to, on fucking LimeWire, Kazaa, Napster, like all the fucking porn that got uploaded to StarCraft maps. Like that was a big thing. Like people would like turn, like it would be like a giant fucking pair of tits or like a giant enormous, penis on the StarCraft map. And I look back at that and it's like, oh, I turned out fine. And I'm sure that there's tons of parents probably who will listen to this who'll be like, oh, I turned out fine. I'm sure my kid will turn out fine. But I think the big difference though, is predation today is so much worse than it was 20 years ago.
Well, it's not even necessarily, I would absolutely agree. And I showed that at the beginning that the predation of children is rapidly increasing. But it's not even just that. I think that there's a lot of parents. You have to think, you and I don't care what you say. My first experience with social media was when I was like 15 and I was coding my own MySpace song onto my profile. All right. So that was my experience. I was a freaking bald programmer because I had MySpace. Okay.
Fucking Harif equals.
Yeah. And we didn't have Facebook. We didn't have thousands and thousands of people to connect with and compare our pictures and all that stuff. And now that's prevalent. And the problem is a lot of parents think, well, I use Facebook and it's fine. And they don't think of how it would affect their children. They don't think about having the difference of maturity and mentality, as a kid. And they don't even compare it to video games or anything else. There's some things that you play as an adult that would not be appropriate, for a kid. And a cell phone and all that stuff is the same way. And this is another good example. Our kids now are physically safer than probably any point in history ever. Our kids are so safe physically now, but we're experiencing more mental health issues than ever. They're at record highs because, again, you can see it in the small font on this slide, but it's pretty average to check your phone between 100 and 300 times a day. And if you're a teenager waiting on a notification from a cute girl, or if you're waiting on a notification for, likes or whatever on your social media, or, I've even seen the new ones, the young kids who are trying to be YouTube stars and influencers or Twitch streamers.
Yeah.
And they're not making it. They're not getting those follows and they get depressed because they're not getting the follows that other people have. And instead of looking at it and saying, I have more follows now than I did a month ago, they're more worried about the follows that they, that I don't have as many follows as Tofu does, And so
Invictus said, is it worse or are we just catching it more? What is your perspective on that?
I would absolutely say that it is worse. And the reason that I would say that, that parasocial and antisocial tendencies have existed for a long time. There's some really good examples of pictures of a bunch of people on a train not interacting with each other because they're all reading the newspaper. Okay, they all have the newspaper open and they're not talking to each other. There's a good example of that. But the thing is 50 years ago, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, we were much, much, much more forced to have real interactions with real human beings. as comparing ourselves to the internet. You know, you didn't have a picture of your neighbor's house and his wife and what he was doing all the time and the money that they have and how much they have compared to what you don't have. And the thing is I think that a lot of this has led to more mental health issues. And yes, we've probably become more aware of them, but our kids are facing a lot more mental health issues than they were, a time ago.
I would even take it a step further, and I would say that because of the internet, you get a lot of people who are able to find common interests together. And that's why you see so many pedophiles, like, like you said, how they found each other on the dark web, or, they find circles where they find comfort because they have like-minded ideas. To where now you see, like the push for maps, minor attracted people, that wasn't a thing 20 years ago. So I think it's both. I would say we're probably catching more, obviously, right? Because there's more of them. So that's like no brainer. But I would
Are you talking about catching more pedophiles, or are you talking about more mental health issues?
Pedophiles.
Oh, okay. Maybe I misunderstood the question. I thought it was referring to more mental health issues.
No. Invictus said, "Are we? Is there more, or are we just catching more?" And he was saying that are they just more? I forgot what the word he used. Or are we just catching more of them for pedophiles?
Yeah, if you're referring to pedophiles and not mental health issues, then yeah, there's definitely more. Simply because there's so much more access to it now than there was 60 years ago. There was no electronic communication with children 60 years ago that didn't exist. Period. In the 1980s, there was no way to remotely or digitally access a kid, and now it's prevalent. You can do it very easily through a Walmart purchased phone. So this is another good slide. I use this for my kids when I'm talking to them at the schools. What I like to talk about, here's a really good example. Let me show you guys. This is the perfect example. Okay. So I'm going to type this in the chat real quick. When you take something from somebody that's so embarrassing from a long time ago, they look back and they're so embarrassed at what they used to be. Okay. So you look at this shit. Okay. You see how embarrassing it is. Look at his face and his reaction. You can see how embarrassing it was, what he looks like. And he looks back on this and man, it's out there forever. Mame Freak has a copy of this. So in case he ever deletes it, it's always on the internet forever. And I like to use this example with my kids because the thing is if you send a naked picture to someone at the age of 12, 13, 14 years old, you send it to a kid, then it will never change. You will always be a naked 12-year-old on the internet, and someone will always have access to that picture forever. That's not ever going to change. There's nothing you can do about it. When you're 23, 33, 43, you will always be able to look back, and that picture will never go away. And we can apply it to lesser things, like I said, that picture of tofu. But those things don't change. Once it reaches the internet, once it's electronically out there, it doesn't go away. And like I said, your kids can be cyberbullied from kids at school. They can send it to a stranger on the internet. It can get posted on Twitter and shared 20,000 times. That kind of thing happens. And then, like I said, it's never gone. It's always out there. So like I said, when you're 25, 35, 45 years old, there'll always be a picture of you without clothes on at 14 years old on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, this portion, I feel like for some of my people in Discord, it's going to be kind of boring because some of you are probably really, really familiar with what I'm talking about. But for those of you that aren't, I still want to go. I want to go over it. Okay, and so one of the methods that images are tracked are through your electronic service provider and your device. Okay, so mobile phones, any internet service provider, anything like that is what's called an ESP. Okay. And I want you all to be aware that even if you turn your GPS location off on your phone still has to ping off of a tower to receive cell phone service. So even if you turn your GPS off, your phone is still sharing location data. Okay. And why this is important is because if you're carrying a phone, it's always got location information, and that's always being tracked on the phone all the time. Okay. So if you take a picture, you take a selfie. Okay. That selfie has what's called a hash value. That's made up of every pixel on the device, on the image. I'm sorry, not on the device, on the image. And every pixel creates a unique hash algorithm. Okay. Again, this may be basic to some of you it may not be. It's the DNA or the fingerprint of the image. If you change one pixel in that picture, it changes the hash value. Now, why that matters?
This?
Huh?
I was gonna say I learned about this because of the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, I learned
Yeah,
about the XMP file because every picture that she submitted
yeah.
as evidence ended up being edited in some capacity.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah,
we in a criminal court, you actually can't do that. They're not even admissible. If they're edited in any fashion, you can't even submit them to the court. It's not allowed. You have to submit the
interesting.
original photos. And if you don't have the original photos, then you can't use them as evidence at all. You have to use most original evidence. So, anyways, the hash value is a DNA or digital fingerprint of the image, okay? And the IP address and any IP address, for those of you know that your IP being at risk is a pretty big deal because your IP address is basically like a license plate to your car or your driver's license. Okay, it has a lot of information, personal information about your internet service provider. Okay, so metadata. You take a picture, or like I said, a better example is your child takes a picture in their room. That image that they took has what's called metadata. It always has metadata. Every image ever taken has metadata. Okay, for an iPhone, this is an example of metadata. Number of images, number of pixels, the date it was taken, the date it was altered, the date it was modified, the date it was digitalized, all those things. But at the very bottom, in the bottom left, if you'll look, it shows the GPS latitude and longitude. That's attached to any image that's taken on a phone. That's always on there, and you can plug these into Google Maps. Now, I want you guys to know that the software that's used to pull metadata off of images is not a paid program. The one I use at the office on a regular basis to pull metadata off of images is open source software that's free. I downloaded it. I use it all the time. EXIF data and metadata, the same thing. EXIF data is the data that's attached to photos. So yeah, it's metadata on images. It's just another term. So EXIF data is metadata, and the stuff that you need as Invictus, you just said that lots of EXIF data gets stripped when it's uploaded. That is not correct, and I want you to give me a minute to get there. So that is not accurate information. So, but the program that you can use to strip metadata is open source software. It's free. It's free. Again, I'm gonna dispute you with solid evidence. If you'll just be quiet for just a minute and hold your tongue, Corey Jr., I'll get there. I promise. Okay. So, I'll get there. So the software to pull the metadata is for free. It's open software. Open source software. You can use it. Again, I have it, and it pulls this data, the GPS latitude, longitude. You can take a picture at a school. You can plug it into Google Maps. You can look it up, and it'll give you the street address. You can drag the little dude onto the road, and you can see what it is. I've solved cases this way. I've had criminals take selfies of themselves with guns that they weren't supposed to have, and I've pulled the metadata from the images, and I've found where they posted in their house and proved that they had guns when they were felons. Like, I mean, this happens, and they show pictures of us. So imagine your daughter or your son taking a selfie and sending it to a stranger on the internet. It's possible that they just gave away their location, okay? And where I'm going to get to when people talk about it being stripped, okay? So again, this is another example, a selfie in a bedroom, okay? And then it can lead to a street address, which can lead to a home address, okay? Now, if you don't want to share your GPS, there's settings in there. You can turn it off. You can turn it off before you send it. You can go into iPhone. There's examples to turn it off. So now, who remembers when President Trump was banned from social media? Who remembers that? When he was banned from Facebook and Twitter and taken off.
I think most people here would remember. Yeah.
As long as they're old enough, I have a lot of people that don't. But he was banned, okay? And so for a lot of you guys that can't stand President Trump and you're not fans of him, I'm not the biggest fan of him either. I'm about to hand you guys some more ammo on why you should hate this guy, okay? I'm going to give you some more ammo right here. So Trump, before he made Truth Social, he advocated for a platform called Parler. He left Facebook, he left Twitter unwillingly, just like he did the White House, and he advocated for Parler. Okay, so then he opened Parler. So when we talk about Parler, Parler was in a very unique scenario because Parler was probably not considered a competitor to Facebook or Twitter really at all. It was pretty unknown. It was probably in the same level of MySpace as far as activity at that point, maybe even less. I'm not exactly sure of its activity, but it was. I mean, most people didn't even know it existed. Well, Trump was banned from these, and he advocated for Parler. Okay, Well, the thing is Parler was pretty unpopular. Didn't have a lot of employees. There weren't a lot of activity. They didn't follow a lot of security protocols because they were a relatively new-ish platform. Okay, it was relatively new, relatively untested. It's like one of those video games that's in early access. Okay, so that was basically Parler. Well, Parler was taken off of the Apple stores and the Google stores for numerous reasons, including not removing violent content and stuff like that. But the big thing was a very basic bug. Parler was not stripping metadata before it was shared to their site. So if you made a post of a photo or a video, all of the EXIF data was available to the public. Now, this made the news. Go ahead.
Real quick, I want to say, so all social media does this. Twitter does this, Discord does this, Facebook does this. It strips the data that allows people to see the GPS, the time, location, etc., etc.
So it depends on what you're talking about, because it was only within recent years that Facebook stopped sharing the EXIF data in the Messenger app. Facebook assumed that if you were messaging someone privately, that you were messaging them privately, that the data wasn't a big deal. Facebook was only stripping on the posts. They were not stripping in Messenger. And in fact, for a long time, Facebook would share the data openly. You can actually click on it and pull up on a map. Snapchat has right now what's called Snap Maps, and anybody on your friends list can see your location at any given time. And so you when you say most social media sites are stripping this data, you have to share the context of what you're talking about. Because yes, for a standard practice operation, for standard practices, they're stripping them when you post publicly. There are a lot of sites out there that are not stripping it when you're sharing it in a messenger type or a private type conversation, because they assume that if you're reaching out to this person privately, it's not as big of a deal if you're sharing data or not. Now, why this was important is because Antifa, when Trump left, the people who followed him were mostly right-wing people to Parler. So Antifa then went to Parler, and they were able to pull metadata for tons of politicians, tons of police officers, tons of elected officials, and they were able to find out where their families live, where their houses are, etc. But the same applies to your children. Now, why I say all this is, what is the number one group out there that's using new, untested, popular apps? Teenagers, kids, TikTok, the newest, most popular thing. Kids are jumping on it like that. They use new stuff. And do you think your kid cares about the security protocols of the newest app out there? I know plenty of kids that were using TikTok openly knowing that it was sharing information with other countries, and they were using it anyway. They didn't care. They don't care about the security protocols. They just care about being popular and what's fun. And so a new untested app, you have to be aware that it may not be stripping this metadata off of the images because it's a new untested app. It's just like a game in early access. There's bugs, there's hiccups, there's protocols that they may not be following. And sure, it's a violation of Apple and Google's store rules, but if they are unaware of it and they haven't removed it from the platform yet, that doesn't do anything to protect the data. Exactly. As Excel said, at that age, you don't think of the consequences. I mean, and even if they do, they don't care because they're not worried about the consequences of sharing my data 10 years from now. They're thinking about right now, what's popular right now. I am going to skip through a little bit of this to preserve time. This is just basically talking about acronyms that people like to use. I wish we had this for some of the sections of the Discord so that I could understand what they're talking about. But as far as your kids go, the kids are using a lot of new acronyms and substitutes for things. Will you call me? Talk dirty to me. I love you. Parent over shoulder, naked in front of camera. There's tons of stuff. Just if you don't know what the hell your kid's talking about, use Urban Dictionary. You can look it up. You can type in these acronyms. It'll help you figure out what the heck your kids are talking about, because there's tons of them that exist.
I mean, if you don't know age, sex, location, you're either like 60, 70 years old, or you're 60, 70 years old. I feel like everyone in this fucking channel right now is listening. LH6. I've got no idea of that one. Let's have sex.
There you go. So
Oh my god.
yeah, so there's tons of these that are out there. You can just you can just look them up on Urban Dictionary. Like I said, I'm skipping some of these because you guys can look them up on there. There's a bunch of stuff out there that kids are using that parents may not understand. Again, for a long time, the eggplant emoji, people didn't know what that was being, codenamed for a penis. This is what I call it by presentation, pickle pics. And then this is the new one that the boys are using. Some of you may already know, shucking corn. Okay, that's talking about being single and alone forever. That's what shucking corn is.
Most people in here probably know what that means.
Yeah. So just if you don't know these things, then you can just look them up. You can just look them up on Urban Dictionary. Okay, so I'm going to skip some of this stuff. You guys know these, know these definitions of what child pornography is and the consequences. So this portion here, and we are getting, I would say, we're towards the latter half of the stuff that I want to talk about. But this stuff here, I want you guys to consider when for any of you that have kids or you're getting to the age of kids, where your kids are getting old enough that they can make these decisions. I want you guys to think about the consequences and how much life has changed since you were a kid to what the kids are facing now, okay? Smaller colleges, normal-sized colleges now are having college admissions officers check kids' backgrounds before they admit them to college because they don't want anything embarrassing to happen to their college and make their college look bad. And because of the prevalence of social media, something that a lot of people don't understand, and I really have to try to hammer my parents on this, is because a lot of people, when I talk about a college scholarship, okay, when I talk about, your kid, if I said that I went to college on a scholarship, a lot of people immediately think either academic or like major sports related, baseball, football, basketball, etc. What they don't think about is like ballerina ribbon dancing or like trap shooting, clay shooting, or canoeing, or whatever. So why that's relevant is for those smaller sports programs that have a very small amount of funding for their programs. When it comes to recruiting, they go to the event. So let's say it's like, for example, this is a more well-known sport and gets a lot more funding. Let's just use golf as an example. And they get there and they see the name Noble Tofu is up to the tee. Okay, they may not have a really high, stellar, highly funded recruiting program, but what do they have in their pocket? The same thing you and I do. And what your girlfriend that you just went on 5 dates with, and she looks up your entire dating history the next night, and she's asking you creepy questions. The college recruiter can do the same thing. Okay, so they hear your name off the tee, they pull open their phone, and they look at your social media while you're standing there. And they may have been interested in you as a recruit, or your son or whatever as a recruit, but because they look at their social media and they see some of the stupid crap that they're posting on social media, they don't accept them. So this is another thing to talk to your kids about, is that just posting things on the internet, posting stupid stuff from schools or whatever, it can cost them in ways that they wouldn't consider. Band scholarships, those smaller scholarships. Exactly what Fuzzy said. You become a PR liability. You post these things and they say they've accepted you. In these social media posts, they keep you from, getting into a school. So, and these are real tweets from coaches and stuff. They just looked them up on social media. They dropped the kids' scholarships basically just because they saw them on social media. And that's a funny one, Dora. I didn't actually know that, but Dora says, remind me of the girl who lost her place at NASA for swearing. It's stuff like that. Again, it can cost you your employment. Kids.
I believe it was, if it's the same one that I'm thinking of, it wasn't because she was swearing. She got hired at NASA, and she went on social media, or I forgot which one it was, and she's like, holy shit, fuck yeah, I just got into my favorite job ever. I can't fucking believe it. And then someone replied to her saying that's a bit of a potty mouth, and she replied back saying, fuck you, I'll say what I want. And that person ended up being like the director of NASA.
So, yeah.
I think it was that.
That's a perfect example of using social media as an idiot. That's really a good example of doing it. And the other thing that you have to think about, I hate to use the term cancel culture, but the thing is what's acceptable right now is not necessarily going to be acceptable in 5 years. So your kids in school posting stuff on social media, and then they start applying for jobs, and they have things on their social media that the job is no longer considers socially acceptable. It could be something that keeps them from getting a job or going to school or whatever. So it's something that you should talk to your kids about when it comes to social media and stuff like that. So getting back to some of the pornography and stuff. Again, I'm not going to tell you guys where to stop or put the definition in for your kids on sexting. Okay, I'm going to leave that up to you guys to have those talks with your kids. But the thing about sexting is generally when sexting gets far enough, it becomes asking for a picture. That's generally how it works. Okay, and so when it comes to your kids talking to these people sexually like this, and they are sending these messages or whatever, especially if it's somebody that they don't know, but it even can be somebody that they do know. So let me ask you guys this, just in general, and I'll include this question to you, Tofu. How stable would you say some of the kids at your school were when you were 15, 16, 17 years old?
Oh, not very stable.
Right,
I
and
don't
so
think.
something
I
that I
don't think
saw,
so.
something that I saw all the time that was really, really prevalent when I was in high school was the amount of unhealthy relationships once they ended. Once the relationship, terminated.
Mhm.
There was
Yep.
a lot of unhealthy behavior regarding how they treated each other when the relationship ended. Well, we didn't experience this as much, but what's really popular now is, so say a girl and a guy are dating, and the girl sent the guy a bunch of pictures. When they break up, the guy, out of revenge and anger, when she gets a new boyfriend, he shares these pictures all over the school, and
Revenge
he
porn.
embarrasses her. He embarrasses her with these things, and so
Hmm.
these pictures that she's sending to someone that is her boyfriend. Maybe they've been together for 6 months or a year, and so maybe you would consider it acceptable behavior because it's sexual stuff between two teenagers. Well, when they break up and he doesn't act appropriately, and then he bullies the crap out of her, or the school does because he shared it with the whole school. So, I like to have this picture because kids don't realize, basically, by sending these photos, you're agreeing to terms and conditions, because at the same time, when it's the high school boyfriend, if you send him this picture and then you break up, he can also threaten you with them. If you don't send me more, I'm going to send these to your new boyfriend. I'm going to send these around the school. I'm going to send these to your mom. And these kinds of things happen frequently.
Are there
It happens a lot. Go ahead.
are there any laws against that for
Yeah,
like
yeah,
for people in like high school?
distributing child porn.
Oh yeah, I mean yeah, I guess. I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah. But like I said, you got to think. So I'm going to get into some pretty. I wouldn't say this is graphic content, but it's a good example of one of the bad things that can go wrong. This is a real person, Amanda Todd. She was in the 7th grade. She used a video chat to meet people over the internet. It was something, along the lines of Omegle or chat roulette or whatever. She met these strangers online, and a stranger, someone she didn't know, convinced her to take a picture of herself and send it to him. Okay, so she started with a picture like this. They continued to talk. They talked for over a year. He asked her over and over to send an inappropriate picture. She finally did. The stranger, his name was Aiden Corbin. He then used that picture to bully her and harass her to send more pictures, do what he wanted to, send it to her friends. She moved towns. He located her again and continued to send the picture to people she knew at her school, cause her bullying and harassment. And in October of 2012, she committed suicide at the age of 15 because of all of these things. And then Aiden Corbin was the suspect. Coben was the suspect in the case, and he was extradited, and Dutch court ruled, and he had to stand trial in the Netherlands, and then was sent for separate charges in Canada. So these are things that can happen to kids, and they do these things. There's a lot more statistics on kids when it comes to sextortion. Same exact thing. They send photos. You send these photos. You get convinced to send these photos. This is another example of a real guy. He got pictures of hundreds of boys, and as soon as they sent him a picture, he then blackmailed them into sending more, um, because if they didn't, he was going to basically shame them. He was charged and sent to prison. And then this is the opposite. Teacher sends a naked picture to a teenager. The teenager then blackmails the teacher for money, so that she doesn't get fired or lose her job or go to prison because she sent a picture to a teenager. So kind of reverse. You send those pictures out there of yourself without clothes on. I would say even as an adult, for most of us, in my job position, I know certainly I could be blackmailed with it. You're putting yourself at a pretty big risk to send nude images out there because of how much power it gives somebody over somebody else. So then you talk about cyberbullying. This is something that happens in school. And on this slide, you see on the text message, "Kill yourself." I want to specify that a lot of people now say KY. A lot of the kids say KYS. They don't actually spell it out anymore.
Mhm.
They just abbreviate it. But that's the thing, is there's all kinds of stuff when it comes to kids. They unlock someone else's phone. They post the stuff on Facebook. Again, they send pictures and then they send them to the whole school. It doesn't even have to be. It doesn't even have to be a stranger. Okay, it can be someone that they know. But when you think about teenagers and the way that teenagers are, they can send these pictures and bully people at the school. And they can make someone's life hell when they sent a picture to someone else that they trusted. So they can do that. They can say things like this, and they can make them make their life hell. They can make their life hell. Okay, I mean, like this is a perfect example. Some of us in here might find this funny, but to someone who's a kid and not really stable and not confident in themselves, you post a picture like this and say, "Can you spot the difference in these pictures?" For kids and kids that aren't confident in themselves, this can be really, really harmful, especially when it's sent all around the school or sent in a school group or whatever. So there's lots of different types of cyberbullying out there. And kids are creative. Okay, this is a picture that people would say, "How is this considered cyberbullying?" Look in the bottom right hand corner, someone's hand over there. It's kind of one of those deals where the kids invited a bunch of people to a group, and then they intentionally exclude somebody from the activities. They're purposefully cutting someone out. And kids are creative. They do this kind of stuff. They invite someone so that they can pick on them. They intentionally leave kids out of pictures or do things like that to bully them. So
Wait,
again, go ahead.
I was going to speak from personal example. Caitlin, when she was teaching 6th grade, I think it was a couple of years ago. But there was a bad case of cyberbullying going around where, mind you, 6th grade, right? We're talking 11, 12-year-olds here. These girls created a hashtag that whole purpose was to try and demean one person. And it was like so rampant that it was like being shared around the entire school. And this is on Twitter, where like the hashtag was like, they were trying to get it to trend. And it was so bad that like the school actually got involved and had to like, crack down on it. And it's, yeah, 6th graders, dude. 6th graders. I remember when I was in, when I was in 6th grade, I was bullied fucking ruthlessly. But like, it was always like, wow, look at this, F gay slur. Like that's what they were always say. It was never like, it was, I think the big difference is back then, 20 years ago, or, however much years ago, when you went home, you were completely able to separate yourself from the school, right? It was your sanctum. It was your salvation.
Right.
And now when you go home, if your parents allow you to go on social media, there is no escape. It's not there.
Exactly. And that is I am so glad you said that. That's a wonderful example, because again, if you're not taking your kid's phone away at night, they may never be getting a break from it. It may literally be constant. And again, we are all, as humans, all of us, we get addicted to this type of stuff. And the kids that are being bullied, even though they're being bullied, they can't make themselves put their phone down. They can't do it. So they're sitting there reading all these hateful things that people are saying about them. I mean, it's the reason that places like /r live stream fails are such a thing. People get addicted to reading the negative stuff, and they read it about
there
themselves.
Before.
Yeah. So I can't imagine that you have. So, and like I said, you think about the Lumster, you ask, are there phones that don't have internet access, or they're old phones now? At the end of this, I say at the end of it, before I go over the really controversial topic, we're going to go over some tools you can use to cut your kids' internet off, monitor their internet access, and stuff like that.
And just to give you a communication here, we've got about 45 minutes before I got to start driving.
Yeah, sure, dude. We'll get through it. So yeah, I'll get there. Like I said, we're definitely in the latter half of it, and there's probably some of it I can speed through. So, but anyways, when it comes to cyberbullying, like I said, especially when it comes to the sexual pictures, you guys have to understand that I've seen kids print these naked pictures out and post them on lockers and the bathrooms. So just because your daughter or your son is dating someone, that doesn't make it safe for sending these pictures or sending these things. And again, I'm showing you some examples: teens committing suicide after bullying, family of cyberbullied girl sue school district for negligence, cyberbullying. My name's Amanda Todd. Cyberbullying on students is a dangerous epidemic. Ongoing stuff. There's consequences to this. About 14% of high school students have considered committing suicide because of cyberbullying. About 7% of high school students at some point have attempted suicide as a result of cyberbullying. Every year in the United States, about 4,400 students commit suicide because of cyberbullying.
Do you know how many schools there are in the entire United States? How many high schools there are?
We posted it the other day. It was like 56,000. I'd have to go look it up. We posted it in the Discord the other day.
I'd be really curious to see if it was matched to have one suicide per school, or how many, like for every other school.
It is not. It's not that many. It's about 7% or a little bit less of students that have attempted in the entire United States. About 7% of students have attempted at some point, and then about 4,400 every year commit suicide, which is not the number of schools. That would be not quite 10% of the schools in the United States. So this is what you should talk to your kids about if they are a victim of cyberbullying, that they shouldn't respond. They should save it, talk to an adult. And then the one that I use to the kids at the school is report it to your ISP. So if your kids ever feel like for whatever reason they're being bullied and they can't come to you to talk about it because it makes them uncomfortable, let them know that the option to call AT&T, to call Verizon, call Facebook and say, hey, I'm being cyberbullied and I don't want contact with this person anymore. Their ISP can anonymously block it for them, and they don't ever have to talk to an adult that is going to, ask them a million questions and pester them about it. Give them that option, to do it in a way that doesn't feel embarrassing or shameful. We all want to be the person that our kid can talk to, but at least give them the option to do it if they don't feel comfortable doing it. Show them that out, that they can talk to somebody else. So, and then something else that to look for on your kids' phones. I see these rampantly on kids' phones. And go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, when you showed me this the other day, when we were like just briefing through the slides real quick to just give me like a heads up on what we are gonna be sharing. I think this part, like of course, like the part that was like depraved, like all the really gruesome stuff, I feel like, as fucked up as those things are, it's like you could see a world where those things exist. And this right here was like, holy shit. Like, I don't know. This part was just like, it blew my mind.
Yeah, so I see this a lot on kids' phones, and I see it frequently on offenders' phones. They use ghost apps or vault apps, and so it looks like this. It's a calculator app. There's tons of them that exist. It's basically a calculator that functions as an actual calculator. If you open it, it will literally function exactly like a calculator. But if you type in a PIN code, it then has photos locked behind the PIN code. And like I said, I see this rampantly on pedophiles or offenders' phones, and it's like this. And so it's apps that you can download, and you download the app, you set it up, and you can give it a passcode and set it up, and you have to press a button, enter the passcode, press it again, and it functions just like a gallery, but it locks them behind a PIN code. So you ask, off duty, how do I know if my kid has an application like this? How do I know if my kid has a bunch of photos saved in their Snapchat My Eyes Only? How do I know if they have, a hidden calculator app? Go to the settings on the phone and look at the battery life. Look at what apps are using the most battery on the phone. If your kid's calculator app is like the number 2 or number 3 most used app on the phone, I would really question that. I find it really unlikely that your kid's spending so much time on the calculator that it's using most of their battery life. And that's how I check the pedophiles. Is I check to see, and you can. Icario says storage. Check the storage. You can check the storage, but not all of these apps will necessarily tell you how much data it's storing or whatever, because some of the calculator apps, it's basically just putting a pin code over a portion of your gallery. So the data can look like it's in the gallery, but it's actually hidden behind a pin code on the app. So it doesn't always show up in the storage, but it frequently or will show up on the battery life. So just be aware of that. And then the other thing, I hear this all the time. If I heard this, if I had money for every time I'd heard this, I wouldn't have to work anymore. That I don't want to go through my kids' phones because it's an invasion of privacy. I don't want to do that because it's an invasion of privacy. I used the example earlier of where if a 40-year-old knocked on your door and wanted to be alone with your 12-year-old, it's not about privacy. It's a safety issue. If you're giving your kids unlimited access to these phones, these electronic devices, and you're not monitoring them, you are literally paying for a device that's putting them at risk. You are literally purchasing a device that is putting your kids at risk. And how can you know that your kids are at risk? If they're spending extremely large amounts of times online, especially at night, if you frequently find pornography on your kid's device, if they're receiving numerous text messages and phone calls from numbers or long distance numbers that you don't recognize, area codes that you don't recognize, this one is, I would think,
that could be hard with all the fucking spam going around these days.
well, but it would be frequent. It would be frequent. And you would know that because if you're actually checking the phone, it would show that the call didn't last 12 seconds. It lasted 20 minutes, 30 minutes.
Fair. Yeah.
All time. And then this one's a pretty obvious one. Receives mail, gifts, packages from people that you don't know. They're getting mail that you don't know. They frequently immediately change or turn off TVs or computers when you walk in. You walk in the room and they lock their phone and put it down immediately. They become withdrawn. They're using an online account belonging to someone else. And then this is example. I wish I'd moved these slides around, but if you suspect inappropriate behavior on your child's cell phone, you can always check settings and storage. So if you look at the battery life, and like I said, you see calculator. I read camera and said camera. I now understand how it feels when you read Twitch chat. So if you see calculator up there in like the top 3 apps, it's using 16% of the battery power. That would be concerned with that. The Lumster says, a lot of kids have 2 or more phones. A lot of work people who have 2 or phones, one for work and one for personal. I would really question the IQ of any parent that gives their kid more than one phone. I would strongly question their integrity and consider if they should even be having children. I really struggle. I really struggle with kids, having a phone, much less a second phone. Oh, you're saying if the kid gets a second phone? I don't know many kids that can afford to get a phone on their own. Maybe possibly if they got one from like Walmart and they're only using it on Wi-Fi. But man, if you as a parent didn't know that your kid was using a cell phone that you hadn't provided, I would really be questioning that. I mean, you really should be paying more attention to know whether your kids. I mean, I would be aware of what devices my kid has and what they're on.
Yeah.
So you can also look at the storage, like they said before. A lot of apps, not all of them, but a lot of apps will show how much data they're using. So whoever said that earlier, I think it was Icario. If you look at a calculator and it's saying it's taken up 2 gigs, that's probably a pretty big red flag. Why is the calculator taking up 2 gigabytes? So this is the portion that for those of you as parents, if you have kids or if you might have kids, this is going to be really, really critical information, probably the most important information that we'll go over. I actually have someone in the Discord, I won't say who unless they come forward and say so themselves, but that reached out to me and asked questions, and they used one of these apps and they highly recommended it. But you can also go into the settings on the phone. You can restrict the phone by default. I think both Android and Apple have these applications. I believe they also have it on their computers. You just have to set it up. There's parental controls and stuff. Also, a lot of websites and applications offer parental controls, Netflix and stuff like that. Somebody had mentioned YouTube. You can go in there and you can set these settings to try to help protect your kids. Then a lot of these applications have a very small fee, $5-10 a month. But here's some applications that you can use. There's so many of them out there. There's so many of them out there that you can use. I've never heard of anybody using Shield My Teen. I have heard of people using Watchdog. I had not heard any complaints of it. I've heard good things. Net Nanny has really, really, really high reviews. Net Nanny is really highly reviewed as an application to help protect your kids. Phone Sheriff. This one here, my understanding, I personally haven't used it myself, but my understanding is that Custodio works on both cell phones and computers. And the person that in the Discord had requested my assistance, I recommended Custodio or Net Nanny, and they used Custodio, and they reached back out to me and told me that it was a really, really excellent application. They said it was a little bit difficult to set up because they weren't very tech savvy, but once they set it up, they said that it was a really great app for monitoring their kids. They said it gave them a lot more access than the stuff that they were used to, and they said that it worked really, 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 really well. So they were really happy with Custodio. So I can't speak personally to it, but I was given good words about it from somebody on Twitch that used it. Then there's Sentry PC, but like I said, there's lots and lots and lots of apps. So, and then what do you do if you find child porn on your kid's device or on a digital device? Do not forward, delete, or alter the image at all. Go in there and place the phone in airplane mode so that it can't be altered or wiped remotely. Doro, we're going to get to your question very, very, very shortly. So put the phone in airplane mode and then contact law enforcement immediately. And one of the big reasons, even if you're not a big fan of cops, guys, okay, one of the biggest reasons that I would encourage you guys to do this, again, even if you really, really don't like police officers, I want you guys to remember that I've told you several cases in here where this stuff has been reported to NCMEC, and the parents didn't know that it existed, but I was made aware it existed. So if you go in and you alter these photos, or you help your kid delete it, or you don't want to call the cops because fuck the police, if you do those things, if you do that, and a cyber tip's made, it may be possible. I mean, you got to understand, we get a cyber tip for this account and we do a search warrant, and maybe we don't get a name, right? Maybe we don't get a username. We might just get an IP address, right? So I get an IP address that comes back to your house to Cox Internet. And so I serve a search warrant, and I ask Cox, on this date and time, I need the subscriber information for who had the IP address at this date and time. Well, it's not going to come back to your kid, right? Who pays the bill? It comes back to you. So I may be doing a search warrant on your house with you as my suspect. I don't know at the time that it was your kid. So then the cops come to your house and they're seizing all of your electronics because they think that you're downloading or sharing child porn, and it turns out that it was your kid. But if I just have a report from, Facebook or Twitter that says that it was shared, and then all they shared with me is a IP address, or a username that I can't tell it's a kid, they may not immediately know that it was the teenager in your house. They may think it was you. And if you're aware of it and you don't do it, I mean, you could be putting yourself through a lot of headache that you don't need to, when you could just call law enforcement and say, hey, I need to know what to do. My kid's sharing pictures that I know are inappropriate. And you could save yourself a lot of headache. Because I've been in numerous houses where I seized every single electronic in the house. And the other thing for you guys to be aware of is any device that your kids have child porn on them, if we come seize them from you, I can't give it back ever. Ever. So if you bought your kid a smartphone, a $600, $800 smartphone, or a tablet or whatever, I cannot wipe it for you and give it back. It would be the same as asking me to clean the methamphetamine out of a pipe and give it back to you. I can't do that. It's contraband. It's federal law. I can't give it back. So if we take it, we destroy it because it contained contraband. So if you see something, say something. And like I said before, it's not a privacy issue. It's a safety issue. I don't know if any of you guys know, this is a really cool article. You might look it up sometime. But Being 13, by an investigative journalism article by Anderson Cooper, have smartphones destroyed an entire generation. If you guys want some reading later, it's a really cool article. It's a really interesting perspective on how smartphones have changed us. So now, To answer Doro's question, which is where is a good place to stay up to date on trends in the event that people have kids or have kids in the future? NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Okay, they have a lot of resources on their website. They allow you to make cyber tips, so you can even do it with electronically, so you don't have to call and speak to anybody. You can make a cyber tip on their website. ICAC, you can look up ICAC, and they have investigative tools and techniques. They have guides for parents out there. They have resources for you to look up like this, resources for parents, educators, and young adults on how to protect your kids. You can just go to icactaskforce.org. Okay, they have a lot of guides for parents, common sense, internet safety 101, lots of guides. iParent TV, parenting is tough, tech shouldn't be. Gives you a lot of guides on what kids are using, what social media they're using, what popular ones they're using, which ones track GPS, all that kinds of stuff. Teen Safe, Parenting Empowered gives you knowledge to protect your kids and support them. KL Greer, really good consulting and educational tool. They have a lot of stuff out there for teaching internet technology safety stuff for kids. The FBI website, one of them they took down, but they used to have an FBI online surfing internet challenge, stuff for kids to do on the internet that was safe, that they posted. And then here's the list of resources again for anybody who wants to possibly screenshot this. Here's the list of all these resources that I have just shared that's available. So if you guys want to be able to look this stuff up on your own, or if you have kids or whatever, it's all right here. The last few slides are the controversial topic that I moved to.
I feel like this is an important part where we take I want this to be like a clear break in the idea of that the past 2 hours was exclusively dedicated to all the parents out there who have kids and are concerned. To now, me and Off Duty are going to get into. It's a controversial topic because, especially me being a video game streamer and growing up with video games.
Yeah, I don't think it's controversial at all, but I think when we get into it, it's where we run people off. So that's why we
yeah.
Because we know this is why Tofu made me mute the Discord notifications, because when I go to talking about this, we're going to hear the hangout.
Everyone's going to start sending you hate mail and telling you to KYS.
This is where the game you started with, Mario Maker, we're ending Mario Maker, and now we're switching to, Brotato.
Darkest Dungeon.
Yeah, our viewership tanks right here. So this is the part of the program that people are gonna like. Just so you know, Tofu, we only have like 30 to 40 slides left, so we're gonna get through this portion pretty quickly. Okay. But I talked about this in the beginning, guys. And I would really like to think for those of you that play video games in here, you're really gonna relate to this. But I could be wrong. It might run some of you guys off. But the amount of explicit material online, I've talked about pornography and Instagram and stuff. It really desensitizes people to sexual content. And I want to be clear that when I'm saying it's desensitizing people to sexual content, I'm referring to teenagers. I'm referring to children. I'm referring to kids that they don't separate the material from the content as well as we do as adults. Like, I don't think any one of us plays God of War. Well, you know what? That's not true at all, because I think if I played God of War, I'd want to pick up an axe and chop lots of you guys' heads off. So I'm not going to even say that. I think it's very possible you play God of War and you do want to pick up an axe and chop people's heads off. But as adults, we're a lot better at separating that. But this is a good example. Okay, so just a quick Google search. This is how, in my opinion, this is a great example of how rampantly available this kind of stuff is on the internet. You type in babies and Google search images, this is what you get. Okay, you get just stupid pictures of kids and babies and stuff. You remove one letter from a Google search. And for those of you I've seen type in Twitch chat, I know how fucking bad you guys are at typing. It would be really easy for you guys to accidentally remove a letter and hit enter. And you type in babes, and this is the kind of stuff that you see. It's available on Instagram, and again, none of this is, I would say, explicit at all. I wouldn't say that this is explicit content, but I would definitely say it's sexual in nature. And, you know, if you think about your teenage daughter, your teenage sons thinking that this kind of, you know, stuff is normal and it's everywhere, then your daughter, of course, thinks, well, it's not that big of a deal to pour beer on my bra and have some other girl lick it off. You know, your 16-year-old girl might think that that's okay. You know, and I want you to consider that. I don't want you to think about it from a perspective as a 30, 25, 30-year-old adult. I want you to think about it from the perspective of a 13-year-old. Okay, that's what I'm trying to get at. Is I want you to consider this
Perspective of a 13-year-old.
Right.
Because I remember when you initially told me this, I was like, you can put this to the end because you might lose some people.
Well, I mean, I'm saying that right now. So, I mean, you think about it. I'm saying perspective of a 13-year-old. For some of you guys in here, your first kiss might have been when you were 22. So, you know, this heart pounding faster, your muscles tighten and all that stuff, your face looking like this, you might not have experienced that until you were 22. But
or I think in your case, 30.
I think on average, you think with my face I waited till I was 30? You're out of your fucking mind. So
where's your woman right now?
Well, I don't need a woman right now, boy. Where's your woman right now? I don't have the mask, man. I don't got the mask. So, but anyways, you think about that, and you think about your kids' first experiences, okay? You think about your kids' first kiss, their first sexual experience. You know, it's something that's really nerve-wracking the first time that they talk to a girl or a guy or whatever it may be. You know, but then you get repeated exposure to this kind of stuff. And you get desensitized. It becomes very normal. And again, something I hear all the time, you know, is kids thinking that it's not that big of a deal to take a picture, you know, in my bra or my panties or whatever. But again, you think about if it was made public, how it would be, and how if it was used against them, it would be. And so, you know, I talk about desensitized. Like I said, you get people here flying in a perfectly good airplane, and they've become so accustomed to it that they just jump out the plane. You know, so you become desensitized to it. And driving, golly, what a perfect example. Driving with a teenager. Look at the dad and the, you know, gripping his seatbelt, gripping the seat. You know, his kid's 10 and 2, driving at the wheel, and it's only a year till they're doing this. You know, until the mom's doing this, you know, so we become desensitized to this stuff.
We grow, I would say desensitized is a good word. I would say comfortable is another one.
Yeah, and you get acclimated to it. It doesn't seem like that big of a deal. You forget you're driving a freaking hunk of metal 65 miles an hour, you know, as a human.
I don't know if complacent's is a good word. I would say that comfortable, and then you overestimate yourself.
Well, yeah, and you think you're immortal, you know? I mean, you think that driving a car at 65 while eating ice cream and texting isn't a big deal, and then you do a butt slam into a foam pit and you break your back, you know? I mean, it's just we're fragile, and you forget about that, and then, you know, and you get hurt, and we just become accustomed to it. So you become desensitized to it. So you know, you look at like some of the number one selling teen franchises, and this, again, this slide is a few years outdated because I believe at the current time, I think Twilight actually overtook Harry Potter, which is a tragedy in and of itself. You know, but Harry Potter actually was overtaken by Twilight. But then the number 2 selling franchise, okay, and I want to talk to you guys about this, is Grand Theft Auto. That was the number 2 selling teenage franchise. Okay, and again, I've played Grand Theft Auto. I'm sure everybody in here has played Grand Theft Auto. Tofu didn't play it, but he says that, and he acts like he's such a big shot when he spends hours watching Pooh role-playing Grand Theft Auto. So he
do not watch Pooh role-playing
Grand Theft Auto. Get the copier mask, buddy. Get the copier mask.
I would rather watch fucking Doru play Battlestar Galactic or whatever the fucking dumb dwarf game is than watching.
Pooh Bear play Grand Theft Auto.
Oh, I do not play.
I totally upset in his stream, hoping he'll raid me.
I can't do it, dude. I can't do Grand Theft Auto. It doesn't relate to me.
Yeah, says the guy that watches girls do online speed dating on Twitch. Get the hell out of here.
Cutebot is fucking awesome. Don't you fucking shit on her. I will stand for Cutebot, dude. She is a badass.
Yeah, sure.
She is so funny.
Get your fucking mask, dude. Get your mask. So my point is that I would absolutely agree that for someone in their 20s, in their 30s, if you want to hop on Grand Theft Auto and go fucking nuts, you know, go to town. And I want to be clear that I'm not just referring to video games. I'm not referring to books. I'm not referring to social media. My whole point is it's the combination of all of them. It's the fact that Grand Theft Auto is one of the number one selling programs, number one selling franchises for teenagers, and it's got strong language, it's got a high rating for this reason. And the thing is that we're exposing these kids. Someone earlier had said violent content. Again, I'm not sitting here blaming video games for kids' violent behavior. I'm not sitting here blaming video games for kids' sexual behavior. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that these kids are exposed to it everywhere. It's exposure on Google. It's exposure on Instagram. It's exposure on Facebook. It's exposure on the nighttime news. And then as parents, if we buy them these video games, that exposes them to this violence. It exposes them to, being able to go out to strip clubs and pick up hookers and stuff like that at the ages of 12, 13, 14, where these kids, for some of you guys in here that didn't have the sexual experience till you were 18 or 19, you're talking about kids that have never had sexual experiences, and they're getting these things from video games. They're getting these things from social media. They're getting these things from their phone. I wish I could have found the study. I wish that I could have found the study. Invictus asked, wasn't that from one of the unofficial mods to the game? Maybe that's true, but I think you are being incredibly intellectually dishonest if you think that kids couldn't install an unofficial mod in about 15 seconds. I think you are being unbelievably intellectually dishonest if you think kids wouldn't figure that out if their parents purchased the game for them. So, but that being said, I wish I could have found the study. I wish I could have found it, and I didn't have time because I got screwed today at work. But there was a study done, and the number one resource for children for sexual education, I'm just curious if you guys know, the number one resource for kids for sexual education right now in the United States is parents. That's the number one resource. Kids rely on their parents for sexual education. Okay? But what was so critical about the study that was done is that if the parents didn't have the conversation of the birds and the bees, if they didn't have a sex talk with their children, the number one resource then immediately swapped from parents to pornography. That was the number one resource for sexual education. Okay, and I want you again, I would encourage anyone in here who doesn't believe what I'm saying, I would encourage any of you in here to go online tonight and watch 10 minutes of a porn video when you aren't trying to be sexually turned on. I would encourage you to do that when you're not going to shuck corn. Okay? If you watch 10 minutes of that video in a context of this is what I'm turning to for sexual education, okay, you're going to see tons of issues. You're going to see, one, an unhealthy body image for both males and females. If teenagers are turning to that for what they should be experiencing during sex, it is an extremely, that is an exact quote, that's exactly what I'm getting at, Insulin Fork, is it gives unrealistic expectations. Body expectations, what sex should be like, and teenagers have been quoted saying, well, porn stars do it all the time, so they must be good at it. They don't realize that is a production. They don't realize that this is all for show, for entertainment, for selling purposes. They think that it's a good place to turn to for sex education. And then you take into consideration the consent issues, how the men treat women in pornography videos. And if that is what your teenage son is using for sex education, man, again, I would encourage you guys to go watch 10 minutes of that and then think that's how my son might treat a woman. I think that if you did that, you would be horrified. And again, you combine that with this kind of content. Okay, you combine that with this kind of content that they're being exposed to, again, like Tofu said earlier, where you can't get away from it. It's on social media, it's on their phones, it's on their video games, it's on everything. And this stuff becomes normalized. And again, I'm not referring to you guys as adults. We can separate, Grand Theft Auto from reality. But a kid who is seeing it all the time, I can tell you right now, the guy who influenced my life a lot as a young kid and teenager died yesterday. At 10 years old, I was running around doing kung fu, trying to transform into a freaking Power Ranger. I did it all the time. As a 10-year-old kid, I watched Power Rangers and I ran around pretending I was a Power Ranger. And if you think that this stuff as a 10, 11, 12-year-old, that they don't go around, and I'm not saying they grab a gun and go shoot people, but if you think that they don't see this stuff and then imitate it, again, I would say that you're being intellectually dishonest. I don't believe, I'm a person who plays video games. All of you guys know that. I spend tons of time on Twitch. I don't believe that video games are any portion of an increase in violence. I don't believe that, and that's not what I'm saying.
Yeah,
What I
wait,
do
wait.
believe,
Go ahead.
go
Go ahead.
ahead.
I'm sorry. No, I was gonna
I was
say.
gonna say,
I
what I
think
do believe is that it's a combination of all of these things. It's being exposed to this content all the time and not having a filter, not having parents that say, okay, hey, it's time to get away from this and go touch grass. It's
it's
time to get
the
away from this.
it's the it's it not being monitored. Right.
Right. Without
That's the
supervision.
thing. Is
Right.
it's all. I mean, everyone always says everything in moderation, right? But it
Right.
specifically, it's because it's not just the phone, it's not just the games, it's all of that when it's unsupervised that it can become such a problem.
Hey, absolutely. And again, you got to think, if you're handing your kid Grand Theft Auto 5 as a babysitting device, man, that is extremely irresponsible. I would argue that you're a much more responsible parent if you let them play it for an hour and then you talk to them about the issues in the game and how this is a game and not real life, and that you need to learn to separate these two, but again, there's
Yeah.
so many people out there that they can babysit their kids by letting them play RuneScape. They can babysit their kids by letting them play whatever on their Xbox, and they just give them unfiltered access to all of these things all the time, and they see these, and like I said, whether it's a mod or not, kids can figure that stuff out so quickly. And then I mean, this is a great example. Teen turned in by his own mom. He said he'd molested 50 kids. I've worked cases. I've had cases, and I sent kids to aggressive sexual behavior counseling because I know multiple kids who had done sexual stuff with their biological siblings. I had a boy last year who was 13 and not being taught sexual education. He did sexual stuff with his 5-year-old sister because he was beginning to experience the curiosity, and somebody, I guess, hadn't told him not to do it. I mean, that kind of stuff happens, and it's terrible, but it happens. I will say that we can now split the screen in two because we did reach the end,
Oh,
and I want to try
sweet.
to answer questions. I know you have to get on the road very shortly.
Sure.
One of the questions is how prevalent are cases of child trafficking incidents where it is forced labor and not sexual abuse? Can they be innocuous as a kid saying they are funding school by selling candy door to door for ridiculous high prices? And two, what time are sexual predators on average lurking the most? After school hours,
Well,
weekends, etc.
that's a really multi-part question. I am not experienced in human trafficking as it relates to labor. I would hypothesize. I'm basing this based off of pure conjecture, but I would imagine it is very, very unlikely that you traffic a child simply for labor when the demand for child sexual content is so high, and the amount of money to be made in child sexual content is so high. There is no reason I would think that you would want to do it for labor as opposed to sexual purposes. But again, I am not experienced in that area enough to answer that question. The second question, however, most frequent times that pedophiles are lurking, I would say, is completely relevant to your location and completely relevant to when kids are online because they know these things. And so, right after school gets out, that is a critical time for pedophiles. Why? Because right when kids get out of school, that is a good opportunity to have contact with kids when their parents aren't around. Parents might be at work for one more hour. So that gives you the opportunity to prey on the kids without the supervision. And I can tell you personally that I know predators go after children who have broken homes or have absent parents because the kids are looking for attention somewhere. And so if a stranger gives it to them, they'll take it and it puts them at risk. And that's just a fact I've known from my personal experience with the cases that I've worked with children. I know that those children are more at risk. But I would say that predators are preying when your kids are online. So the frequent times your kids are online, that's when they're going to be online.
That was actually all the other questions that were answered or asked anonymously were questions that you answered during the PowerPoint. Such as like what apps, you asked about the different country, or it was asked about the different countries, and you went over Mega, and then there was 2 others, but they were trolls. So
Gotcha. Yeah, and I wish there was a bigger push for social media in the United States to take this information and use it a lot more seriously. I've had this conversation with both of you, and I believe the other person I've had it with was Koreetsu. I think it was in the politics channel. But something that's really frustrating to me is it's well known. It's well known that social media applications, your phone. I mean, do you know right now why you get scam calls? Do you know why you get scam
because
calls?
my information was sold.
Right, your phone company sold your information for money. They sold it for money, and what's so frustrating to me is that we get so worked up as a society that I'm getting these spam calls and my company sold my information, but yet we don't encourage the companies to turn the information over to law enforcement when we know it would protect children. Like, why are we so adamant that the companies, it's fine if Facebook sells all of my cookies to their ad department so that they can specifically target me with ads that I'm going to buy because of my Google search history, but yet we don't allow Facebook, or we don't encourage Facebook to freely turn over all of the subscriber information to law enforcement of an account that was uh, associated with such child porn. I mean, honestly, you tell me why we are okay with it as a society that Facebook openly uses my data for ads, and I continue to use Facebook. But yet, if law enforcement is made aware of child exploitation content, we make them get a search warrant and search through that social media when it's already been reported. I'm not saying that like it's reported in person. I'm saying Facebook has already identified it and said this is child porn. This account has child porn. Okay, we're telling you this account has child porn. But then if you want it and you want the evidence, you need a search warrant. That is bizarre to me.
That sounds like it's so fucking bass backwards. Like it just makes no sense.
So bizarre, and it's like totally fine that Facebook sells every bit of my Google information and targets me with specifically targeted ads. We see your YouTube all the time of your tactical pants and whatever. Every time you play ads and you pull them up on stream because they're targeting through your cookies and stuff like that. But again, if you've messaged a kid inappropriately and the social media is aware of that, do they give that to law enforcement? No, they don't. What they do is they say, hey, just so you know, this account is associated with child exploitation. If you want it, you need to give us a full search warrant and a preservation request so that it doesn't get deleted. Da da da. I mean, for example, do you know the scummy shit that TikTok does to get around the federal statutes?
I don't actually.
So I've told you guys that it's required by law that you have to report it to NCMEC, right? As soon as you're made aware, you have to report it to NCMEC. Okay? Well, what TikTok does is they're batching all of their child porn content, and then they wait and report it all at the same time. So, for example, okay, I had a case reported to me through TikTok. It was reported sometime, I think, in June or July, from a case that occurred in January. Okay, the child porn was shared in January. So then I send a search warrant to TikTok, and they reply to me, sorry, it's past the 90 days. We don't have it on our servers anymore. I didn't even get the report till July. Like, they circumvented the process by waiting to report until the time period for the data was already gone. And it's like, well, we should have better legislation. Okay, sure, that's a valid point. What about having companies that have morals and want to stop child exploitation?
Yeah.
Like, why are we asking legislatures to write this into law instead of holding these companies accountable for why are you protecting child exploitation.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense. And it's like, search warrants, Fuzzy Creature says search warrant protects them against something goes wrong if they volunteer it, correct? This sounds like a liability issue. Do you not think it's a liability if your platform is being used to exploit children and you make law enforcement get a search warrant to protect these kids? Like, do you think it's more of a liability if you share someone's information, or if you were aware that a kid was being sexually assaulted for 3 months, and then by the time law enforcement writes a search warrant, the kid's already committed suicide because they're
Yeah.
being sexually assaulted? Think about how many kids we could save and protect if we disclose this information rather than require so many hoops to jump through it. And I'm not saying that they should turn over all law enforcement to the government. I hate the government as much as anybody else does. I can't stand big government. I can't stand the idea of it. So, when you're talking about like financial crimes or burglaries or anything drug related, whatever, sure, make them get a search warrant. But I think that a blanket no child exploitation policy, no tolerance policy, I think that's pretty reasonable. And I think that a lot of people would agree
I
that's
think
pretty reasonable.
that everyone has a hierarchy of values, right? We all have like values that we have like that, tier down from top to bottom, right? And I think that a lot of people don't understand. Like a lot of people always say protect the children, but I think a lot of people don't understand how much people are or how much children are being preyed on. So the value of protecting children usually doesn't usurp another value that is
And
there.
the biggest problem when it comes to child sex crimes, and Fuzzy says apparently they don't. I'm not arguing with you about the worst of the horribles. I didn't think that you were arguing. I understood that you were discussing a liability, but I'm countering the liability argument with that. I think that it's a worse liability to know that these kids are being exploited and then continue to allow it to happen.
Yeah.
That's my point. Is that these children are being exploited, and because you're worried of a liability of turning information over to the government, your alternative is let the kids continue to be exploited. You know what I mean? I think that that's such a disgusting thing. What was it that you just said, Tofu? Repeat what you just said if you
Uh,
remember.
I said that we all have like it's like a structure of values, right? Like imagine a
Yeah,
pyramid. The
yeah.
very, very top. It's like a
So my response is, and what makes child sex crimes, what makes it so hard, what makes it so hard, is that we are surrounded. We have a society of people who, when a child sex crime comes up, they take their laser headband and they pull it down over their eyeballs. They don't want to see it. They want to bury their heads in
it's
the sand and they want to
it's
pretend it doesn't exist. Why do you
Mhm.
think that? Why do you think that police officer violence is on the news but child sex crimes aren't? When I do
Because people don't
jury
want to see
trials,
it.
exactly, it's not
They
that
don't
it's
want to see
not
it.
an important issue. It's not that it's not an important
Yeah.
issue. It's that we don't want to see it. When we do jury trials on child pornography cases, we intentionally limit how much is shown to the jury, because if you show them too much, they lose interest. They don't want to see it anymore. You'll see them turning their heads away from it because of how gruesome it is. They don't want to see it. And so the problem is that I was just making an example of putting on a blindfold, Invictus. So the point is that people they want to bury their heads in the sand, and they know it exists, but they don't want to know it exists as prevalently as it does. And then the problem is that it comes knocking at your kid's door, and now you realize it's a big issue, and it's too late. Like,
Yeah.
we could have prevented this had you opened your eyes and seen Roblox, Minecraft, Xbox, Messenger for Kids. Unsupervised, you are literally um, handing your kid a device to talk to pedophiles. Beck
Well,
Neard says, ODG, have you presented yourself in court as a subject matter expert on cases? Yes, I have. I've testified in court a lot of times. They qualify me that way almost every time, basically by asking me the questions Tofu talked about at the beginning. How many cases have you worked? How many times have you filed felonies? How many phones have you gone through? Stuff like that. And they generally, when you say qualify me as a subject matter expert, that's a specific term used in court, and they generally don't do that with the case agent which is what I would be. So like when we refer to like a subject matter expert, usually it's bringing in the guy that does like the phone extraction. So, when I take a phone to the Secret Service or state lab or whatever, and they extract the phone, they'll qualify themselves as a subject matter expert. But yeah, so it's just very different when you're the case agent as opposed to just somebody testifying on one little thing that you did on the case.
I think it's funny because you say like people stick their head in the sand, and I think I would say that there's also a lot of people who don't even realize how bad of a problem it is. I really think that, and the reason I think that is because last year when we started like talking, becoming friends and stuff, I didn't think. I mean, I always knew it was like a problem, but I it's like what would you tell me on how however many pedophiles there are, times that by 1,000.
Yeah,
like if you sit there and like you think if like in my city, right? If I just like like thought about my city and I was like, oh, maybe there's like 30, and then if I time that by 1,000, it's like
yeah,
the
yeah,
idea that they're everywhere. It's insane.
it's just the same analogy of when you hear the old-fashioned saying, if you see one mouse in your house, that means there's 10 behind the wall.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. We only catch the dumb ones. We only catch the dumb ones. You know what I mean? So for every dumb one out there, there's another smart one hiding behind the wall. Hell, I'll tell you guys a creepy one that I had recently. I can't say names or use specific examples because he hasn't been prosecuted yet. But I had a guy that was pretending to be a teenager on social media. He was pretending to be a teenager, and he would reach out to girls. He reached out to hundreds of girls. He solicited hundreds. He was only successful with like 40, but he solicited hundreds of them. But what he would do is he would solicit them and ask them questions, sexual questions, stuff like that. And if he got rejected, he would come back like 3 months later, and he would say, "Hey, I know we haven't talked in a while, but my sister is a model for XYZ company, and she gets paid money, and she gets free clothes, and she gets free shoes. And she saw your picture on my phone the other day, and she thought that you would be a great model. And, you should send pictures to this email." And she was saying that you could totally become a model and join her and da 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 da. And so you would go from trying to personally prey on them to then creating this fake model account to solicit children. And he did it to, I mean, again, we charged him with almost 50 felonies. What is your opinion of the MAP movement? And I don't, it says, and if it's something NCMEC is considered, where do they stand? I couldn't tell you where NCMEC stands on it. I think it's disgusting. I don't think there's any universe in which, minor attracted persons, that's what MAP stands for, is acceptable. I think it's a disgusting movement. Do you find the large amount of internet vigilante predator channels helpful or hurtful to the job that you do? This is an interesting question because it very much varies on the type of vigilante that they are. So I actually had the honor. It was a really cool experience. We worked with we worked with um, we worked with a group that was one of those vigilantes, and they were doing a bunch of nonsense. They were breaking rules as far as laws go. They were basically doing what's called entrapment, and it made the cases no good. And we pulled them aside. And we said, "Hey, listen, do you guys want to keep making these videos and getting famous on YouTube, or do you actually want to see some of these guys go to jail?" And they were like, "Well, we'd love for them to go to jail. We don't know why they're not." And we were like, "Because you're ruining our cases. Like, you're doing entrapment, and we can't prosecute them." And so they actually agreed to a sit down with us, and they agreed to go through training. And we actually have used their cases multiple times. We've had them testify on the stand now and prosecuted them, and they've worked with us because they had their undercover people that are doing the messaging follow some of our training and protocols. And now we're able to use some of the messages that they've sent and use them in court to prosecute them. So Invictus asks, do you think mandated reporting laws help or hurt? I would be really curious to know in what context you believe that the mandated reporting laws could hurt. I can't really think of a perspective in which the mandated reporting laws are harmful to protecting kids. So yeah, and like I said, while he's typing his question here, to answer, it's all dependent on the group. Some of the groups work really, really well with law enforcement, And then some of the other groups are literally just looking for clicks on YouTube, and it just kind of depends on what they're looking for. And if they want to shame those guys, I mean, you think I'm going to sit here and say that they shouldn't be shamed on the internet? I can't go out there and encourage it in my current job position. But I mean, we get a good laugh out of watching it on YouTube just like anybody else. But we also like it better when they work when they work um, when they work when they work hand in hand with law enforcement. My ex was a social worker and said that makes a lot of reports that go nowhere, wasted their time, and ultimately just took away from more important work. So I mean that I don't think that neglects mandatory reporting laws, because the problem is that I would agree. I've had lots of teachers, I've had lots of faculty, because they want to be on the safe side, they report something that's nonsense. But I would way rather go spend 15 minutes of my time weeding out something that's nonsense than the teachers don't report it because it's not mandated. And if you think for 1 second that if it wasn't required law and the high school football coach that wins every game has been doing stuff and did like the high school girls, you think that the school wouldn't cover that up with how much money and stuff that they're making off of the football program if it wasn't mandated by law? You are out of your mind. Like, they would cover that up in a heartbeat. So I think that those mandatory reporting laws are extremely important, because I think that if you didn't have that in place, then they couldn't. You wouldn't have excuses to stop that. You're getting your warning to go, I assume. They are. I mean, they probably already do. I mean, you may be right, but the thing is if they do, they can be held criminally liable. I specifically removed this example because I'm not talking to teachers, but there was a school in my state where 3 administrators, because what they did is the teacher reported to the principal, who then reported to the superintendent, and then the superintendent didn't call. And so none of them called and reporting it. And one of the employees had been doing it for several years. And every single one of those employees also went to jail. They served jail time because they didn't follow the mandatory reporting laws. So yeah, they can cover it up, but it gives us the teeth to try to punish them for doing so. So I think without those laws, it doesn't give you the teeth. So I would say that those laws, I think, are important and definitely productive, more so than they are negative.
And not to be too sappy or anything, but I really value the relationship I have with you.
Yeah,
Because what you've like opened my eyes to is something that I don't think you can learn unless you have someone in your perspective.
yeah.
Someone who's sitting there dealing with the objective worst side of humanity on a day-to-day basis. It's insane.
Yeah,
But
I
I
think,
really,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I just want to really thank you for your time here, because I know it's, everyone's time is valuable.
Yeah, for
So
sure. And I mean, the stuff that I've done, the cases I've been a part of, and the things that I've done, the places I've seen, etc., it's changed my life forever. And I'll reach out to you guys. Can reach out to me anytime. I'd be happy to give you my perspective. I'd happy to give you my advice. I will say, you guys, I've made it open that I'm stepping out of law enforcement. And I'm one of those guys that I try to be very reasonable. You guys feel free to reach out to me at any time, but these things are constantly evolving, and in 2 3 4 years time, I'm going to have a lot more knowledge than a layperson, but I'm going to be way behind on those trends. So I don't mean any offense to you guys, but feel free to reach out to me. But even in a year's time, if you reach out to me, I may point you somewhere else, because they're going to be more fluent in the trends that are going on than what I am, because it rapidly evolves so fast. There's so many new games, new social medias, new applications that they use. Yeah. My last day in law enforcement is next week. So I have one more week, and then I'm done. I'm going to be working in IT and cybersecurity stuff. I've got out of it for the stuff that I listed about earlier. So those things change and those trends change. So I'd be happy to help anybody. And if you guys want my advice, I will. Obviously, just give the disclaimer that I've been out of it for however long, because the longer I'm out of it, the further behind on trends I'm going to be. But I would be happy to answer you guys' questions anytime. I've done so for several people, and and if I can't get the answer, I can at least try to point you in the right direction.
yeah, thanks again, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we'll just we'll do one of these again and just bullshit for once instead of having to have such a
Yeah.
difficult to swallow conversation. I do have to get going.
Let's end the Zoom call. When you leave, people are gonna bolt like crazy. That's like you rated me on Twitch. They're gonna bail.
You're the only person who's allowed to talk here, so you're good to go.
Oh, I'm in control.